short.
Sorry, this is now broadcast, just for your information.
Just seen the message.
Thank you.
Well, I just say as chair, I can't open the meeting formally until we're quorate and we're still waiting.
Fine. Yeah, just to let you know though that people are actually now can actually join the meeting, so you won't see them, but they will be. They are there listening.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. Yes, Chair. Perhaps if we could wait a few minutes, and in the hope that we shortly become quorate. I don't know if Rob, if there's anything we can do to assist. And I know that we had a notification of a couple of potential late starters, but hopefully we'll get there very quickly. I think you're on mute, Rob.
And if somebody...
There it was.
No, the spell has
worked.
Oh,
right, good. Welcome, Nick.
Hello, hi. I was just trying to find which email had got the login details on it.
But anyway, whichever one it was, you've made it.
Thank you, yeah.
We still need Councillor Tony Mason to appear. Are you there?
Is Mike Davies with us, Chairman?
Yes, I am, Mac. Yes.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Can't see your picture there, Mike.
Sorry.
And did we get any response from Ian Benny? Good morning, Kim.
Morning, Kim.
Good morning, and apologies I'm late, Chair. I had a few problems logging on this morning.
It's okay. We're taking it gently at the moment. I think we're just quorate. So once I can see and hear from Councillor Mason, I'll be able to begin.
Can
I'm here. I was just on another call.
Okay.
But I'm here now.
Apologies, Chair. May I just interrupt? I've had an email from Councillor Bailey who says that she doesn't have the details to get onto the meeting. Could somebody send her a link into the...
Councillor Bailey?
She says, yes.
Are you able to do that?
She's the leader of East Cambs Council. She said she would like to be able to view the meeting, and she can't seem to find the link under the meeting documents in the calendar. So could somebody, thank you.
Okay, I can send her I'll send her the link, Ali. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
And we should have sent a link to Ian Benny. Could Ali or Sue see if you can ring him at home or send him another email, because if he got the link, I would have expected him to be here now.
So can you, when you do the one for Councillor Bailey, can you resend the one to, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And although we can't see you, Tony Mason, you are here, is that right?
Yes, I am here. I thought I had chosen to show myself, but it seems to have come up blank. So,
could you try again?
I think I'd have to log out and log back in again, if that's okay.
Councillor Goldsack is actually an attendee. He's a member of the committee though, isn't he?
He is.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll bring him over. There we go.
Hi. Good morning, Mark. Are you there?
He's frozen.
Mark? Better. Good morning. All right.
I've been online for a little while. I've been waiting to be brought in, but
no.
I can see all of you and hear all of you. But
okay. Well, you're with us now.
Look forward
hopefully, Ian Benny will join us later, because he didn't have the link, but it's been sent to him twice now. So we're quorate, and I'd like to start, and I'll start with some pre-meeting comments before we get into the meeting proper. I thought we should start at 9 o'clock-ish, partly because we have to debug the technical issues, and partly after the March cancellation. It's quite a busy agenda, and I wanted to give us plenty of time to try and get through it all today. and I'll make a break about halfway through so that we can. I'm sure people can wander off, make a coffee as well, but a proper break we'll put on. Now the Zoom protocols I have are that this meeting is recorded. Well, it's not open to the public live, but it will be available subsequently. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Could you turn your mics off when you, except when you want to talk? And if you indicate what when you want to speak, I'll do my best to arrange the screen. But you can just raise a hand. I'm advised is probably the easiest. But if not, you can use chat, which is recorded, or you can raise an electronic hand. And don't let me move on without having picked that up. In the unlikely event we'll have to vote on anything, we'll do that orally, and I'll ask each of you to speak. That's so that it's recorded and open. And when we get into all these technical difficulties, then Sue Hall is our Zoom host. All right, and we've got 2 Councillor Masons now, which is
the other one.
Okay, right. So that was just the context, and now I'll open the meeting formally. We haven't had any apologies for absence, and I know that Ian Benny is trying to join us. Are there any declarations of interest? No, there are no declarations of interest. I'd just like to welcome the 2 Roberts to this meeting, and I'll take care to make sure I refer to the right Robert, but we've got Robert Parkin, who is the permanent monitoring officer, and we have Robert Fox, who's the interim scrutiny officer. Did I get that right? So welcome to your first meeting. So that was apologies and declarations of interest. Are we happy to go to item 2? All the membership has been rolled forward, and as far as I'm aware, we will be the same membership as we were last year and who are here. The only one that's not yet formally blessed is that the Fenland haven't had their AGM to complete that. But we don't choose a vice chair today because we have to wait for the authority board to delegate that task to us. So I expect Matt Maguire remains the vice chair, and we have to reselect a vice chair or decide on a vice chair at our next meeting. So those are the points I had on confirmation of membership. People happy for me to move on? Okay.
Yeah, could I, sorry to interrupt, but could I just confirm why this meeting is not a public meeting? Perhaps I could ask the monitoring officer to come in. Is it that we are having a briefing in advance? Is this a private briefing for the members of the committee? Because
the Chair, I had absolutely, my understanding was that this was a public meeting, being in the sense accessible by any member wishing to attend it. There is an online link available, and participants can join. It is not being, my understanding is it's not being live streamed because the CPCA does not have that capability. That does not prevent members of the public attending the meeting by joining the link. I don't know if Sue can just speak to that point.
That is right, yeah. It is, people can join it now. It is open to the general public. It is recording, so the general public can access this meeting. The link is on the website, on the meetings page where the documents are, and they just access that link and they come into the meeting. You can't see them and they can't see you, they can see you, but we do not live stream as put it onto YouTube. That's what we don't do. Okay.
That is something, Chair, that is being examined, by the way, and I hope to report back generally on that. But yeah, please be assured it is a public meeting for the purposes of the regulations.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. I'd misunderstood my briefing. I thought it was only the rebroadcasting, but it's good to have that clarification.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll move on to item 3, Chair's announcements. You will have seen there's an additional urgent item has been added to the agenda, which was agreed with me, and it is perfectly admissible in the way these things are done, I'm advised. And I'll take that item. I want to make sure that the things that require more thought or discussion are further up the agenda, so in case we run out of time, in case we get sidetracked by the statement of accounts briefing and things like that. So I'm going to bring the urgent item to immediately after the risk register review. And I'll remind you when we get there. And I'll also move the trading companies item because there's a lot of new things in there, which may cause some, create some discussion, and that will come after the urgent item. So as we get to those two things, I'll remind us we're doing that. And we might also have to be flexible on when we do external audit, because the external auditors will be able to join us at 11 o'clock, but they'll only be here available for about an hour. Is that right? Yeah. So when they've joined us, I'll fit them in the agenda as when we finish whatever item we're on at that stage, if that's okay. Are people comfortable with that? Okay. And so it's not linked with the discussion that we have when we get to the item on internal audit. I just need to share with you that the up to now, the support services have come from Peterborough City Council, but the service level agreement between the Combined Authority and Peterborough City Council has recently ended, and the Combined Authority are looking at how these services will be obtained in the future across the piece. And they're particularly bearing in mind that the nature of much of the work may have to be refocused as we get out of lockdown, because there'll be a greater emphasis on the Combined Authority contributing to economic recovery when we get to some normality. So in that context, it's been decided that we'll have a look at how internal audit is to be provided and to see whether it lines up with the way that the authority thinks business will, the changes that are in their focus of business in the future. So the intention is for a review to take place on how we look at internal audit, and we'll bring a paper to the 31st of July meeting on recommending a way forward. And I just wanted to raise that now so it didn't get conflated when we get to the internal audit update. But you will note in the second half of the internal audit update, it talks about the fact that the plan for next year has been put on hold whilst more thinking is done. I don't know whether, John Alsop, you want to say any more, or anybody wants to ask questions about this? No? Okay. If we could then move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy with them as a record, and are we happy to approve them? Okay. So do we need names for seconders, or we've had confirmation from members that they're content?
Happy to second it, Chairman. I'm content.
Okay, thank you. Then there's the action notes that go with it. I think they're a bit, they need some tidying up. I think that's a reflection that what's happened in the last few months. So I'll undertake to make sure they are tidied up for the next meeting. I don't intend to lose sight of any of the actions on there, and I'll make sure they're in their work plan or papers at the next meeting. And some of the items I dropped on advice to give time for further thinking before we see a paper. So it will be tidied up for next time, and we won't miss anything. But I don't know whether anybody has any questions or comments on what is in the list as it stands.
Chairman, could I come in? It's Max speaking.
Please.
Could I just be reminded, if I ever did know, what the green band means? It's cuts through the box where John Hill is providing information. That's all. I'm not sure what page number that is. I just wondered, what's the significance of the green band? Because it looks to me like it separates the completed from others, but can you just confirm that?
Yes, I think that's true, except that in the one you've chosen, the clarifying the roles of the joint CEOs be produced, that has been actioned. It doesn't show it in the action sheet.
Oh, okay. That was partly the reason the question was.
And part of the tidying up will be to get the stuff that's still open at the front of the list and the history at the back of the list. And I will be working with the scrutiny officer to make sure that in each of the blocks there's some indication if there's no action as when the action will be done, or if the action has slipped whilst it's been done. I think we've just lost a little bit of it's the discontinuity of having changed scrutiny officers twice, I think, before Robert Fox arrived. And so it's not got the attention that it should have. I apologise for that. It's partly my fault.
Chair, it might be helpful, Chair, if when the action, we put the date of when the action came from, when you do the tidying up, because then it gives us this kind of historical notion about when they were done.
That's a very, very good point.
If possible.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Robert Fox, would you put that in as well? It's provenance. Thank you, Mike. Anything else on that item, or are we happy to move on? Still no Councillor Benny, no news? Do we have a phone number for him? Can somebody talk to him?
I've emailed him separately and he's had the link, so I've not had anything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that was item 4, if we're happy to move on. Item 5 is the Combined Authority update, and Kim, I would be very grateful if you could, bearing in mind how long it is since we collected together as a committee and all the odd things that are happening in the land, it'd be quite good to have an insight as seen from your perspective and what the Combined Authority Board is up to.
Thank you, Chair. So the Combined Authority Board began its year with a very packed agenda in January. We had a review of our business plan, housing business plan for our housing company. Our risk management strategy, our data protection policy were introduced, and we also revised our own business plan for the Combined Authority to focus very much on the 17 key priorities and funding around that. We continued our affordable housing programme, and we had a loan to a company, and this was the first of the start of loans around the development of the £100,000 home as well. So we were bringing forward or enabling small developers to bring forward developments which could include, as part of their affordable housing offer, a £100 million home. We also approved our local transport plan, which was a significant document for us and one of our key strategies. At the same time, beginning a consultation on the locations of the CAM, and that was quite a wide consultation that went out, thankfully, before COVID kicked in, because then at our next meeting in March, the focus was very much on the impact of the COVID virus. We, as you may know, we weren't entitled at that time to hold a public meeting, but what we did was we set up a Zoom meeting. Effectively, we held a public meeting where we relied on the Mayor's general power of competence in order to take decisions, and that enabled the business of the authority to proceed. And under that business, we were able to go ahead and approve some housing grants, and that sort of enabled the, well, we hoped would minimise the impact of COVID on the construction market. We also set up a capital grant scheme, for small businesses. So we already had a capital grant scheme going for small businesses for fairly small loans. This was extended to the criteria for this was extended to cover COVID related impacts of business. And we have since then actually done 2 further things in relation to that. So we've increased the fund. As you may know, there was a further increase to the fund in March to allow the to increase. I think it was up to 5.4 million we've given away so far in grants to small businesses. This included a sum of funding for what we call very small businesses. So these are the ones who don't have any rateable value, so can't claim funding from government, or fall somehow between the cracks of the government policy, so that they're not receiving any funding. So we set up a small fund for those, and we've also repurposed our growth fund service, so that we are targeting this new growth fund service around COVID assistance to businesses locally. So the focus very much in the second part of this quarter was ensuring that we could in some way make some impact into the market to assist people who may already be feeling the impacts of the COVID virus. As I say, we've got another meeting only days away, which will begin, sorry, we had a meeting in April, sorry, which then that built on those COVID issues, and we are focusing around that in order to ensure that what we can do is assist those businesses. We'll continue to do that. We have a COVID response report on every agenda, which aims to update members around where the authority has responded to the impacts of the virus. I'm Chair, I'm happy to take any questions around that. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a scrappy response. It has been, as you can appreciate, for all of us, very, very busy over the past few weeks, and we have been trying to do our best to respond as best we can to COVID, with a number of things coming at us in a very short space of time. But happy to take any questions on any of the items. I think you should all be receiving the agenda for each of the Combined Authority board meetings, and we have our next board meeting coming up next week. So you should then see that we are starting our AGM this year, and as the Chair said, confirming the membership of this and other committees going forward. But happy to take any questions on that.
Anybody? Mike, Davey?
Do you want me to come in first, Chair? Sorry.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Kim, I'm sure must have been very difficult for the last couple of months, and appreciate all the work that you and the Combined Authority have been doing. I suppose the key question for us as an audit committee will be about the governance processes of the decision making that's taken place. And again, I appreciate, obviously, from our authority, we've had to rush around, but will we get to see the governance decision-making processes, or will they be attached? Are they new, or will they be linked to existing processes? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. If I can respond to that one. Yes, as you know, we have an assurance framework that sits around all the decisions that are made by the Combined Authority and the Business Board. And so when we introduced not only the extension of the existing capital grant scheme, but also the new scheme for very small businesses, we have to ensure that that is assurance framework compliant. We have also been keeping government up to date. One thing we have learnt very rapidly throughout this is that we have had a much closer working relationship with the government, with civil servants. You may know that the Mayor has been very closely engaged, so he's been leading a mayoral forum which has been meeting once a week to look at assistance to businesses. So it's drawing together lots of businesses locally, banks, businesses, and also all of the transport sector, etc., into one forum where he can talk about issues that impact our area particularly. Then those are fed back into the government minister. And they are also then closely aware of all of the governance process around these new funding streams. And we've received an acknowledgement. There was a meeting with the LEP chairs last week, and we received an acknowledgement from Simon Clarke, the Minister, that he was very pleased with the way that the Combined Authority had responded by repurposing some of its funds to meet these gaps in the market. So yes, they are all there. In relation to our decision making, we were, I think, probably the first authority in the country that held a public meeting. We were only able to do so because of the Mayor had a general power of competence. So effectively the Mayor was making the decisions, but he invited all of the members of the board to read. We published all the papers. He invited all comments on those, debate on those, to ensure that before he made any decision, he had the full impact of the board and the full views of the board and opinions of the board before those decisions were made. And we ensured that government were kept abreast of all of those constitutional responses to COVID, as well as the business responses that we've made.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Any other questions? Nick?
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got a question about the governance processes around the local transport plan. It was subject to consultation in summer 2019, and both myself and a number of other Peterborough councillors put in some comments about the absence of any real sustainable transport schemes regarding Peterborough. Yet we didn't really hear anything since then, and until I saw the papers for this meeting, I didn't even realise that the local transport plan had been approved in January. Is it not normal in these sort of processes to, when you've received consultation, shouldn't you publish some sort of report saying what has actually happened as a result of the consultation? Has such a report been published?
Yes, Councillor Sanford, I'm not aware of your particular query, but I'm happy to take that away and have a look at it and get back to you to find out what happened to your response. But you're quite correct that if we receive comments in, then clearly there is an obligation on us to apply the rules of consultation, as it were, to ensure that responses are, or that you feel that your matters were addressed during the course of that consultation. So I'll come back to you if that's permissible with the response to your specific query. Thank you.
Sorry, David, you'd changed.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Welcome, Ian, and for overcoming the technical to get to be with us this morning. And I think we should just note in the minutes that you joined us at this item. Kim,
Thank you very much.
Okay, and if we could keep muted when we're not talking, that helps. Kim, at the beginning of the meeting, I talked about looking at internal audit in a different way, and part of that I was advised was because of the expectation that the nature of the focus of some of the work of the Combined Authority and its priorities would change, and that would inform the thinking about an internal audit plan for next year. I wondered if you could say something about that.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I think, what are you actually talking about, the changing priorities of the organisation, or are you talking about the internal audit generally? Because we have, as you know, when we were set up, we had a number of internal SLAs with local councils, because we were set up, we were a very small organisation when we were set up with only 6 employees. So our initial job was to ensure that we could provide the full suite of support for the organisation. And so we entered into a number of SLAs for those services to be provided by mostly constituent councils. As we have grown as an organisation, we are discovering that we need to bring more of those in-house. And that's why we had largely the staffing restructure last year, to ensure that we had a proper workforce to support the work of the organisation. We are finding now with that's the same sort of with procurement, with internal audit. So there are several services that we take externally that we perhaps need to be thinking about bringing in. I think as well there is, it's always good, isn't it, to have your internal audit team that looks at you, and probably not working across several organisations that you're connected with, because that can at times potentially put them into conflict if they work out of Peterborough and there are issues, but you know, that reflect upon both Peterborough and our work. Then it's probably better to have that independence from elsewhere, rather than sort of set up a network of internal audit across the county. It's probably better that we seek our own internal auditors exclusive to the combined authority. And I think given the number of challenges we face as an organisation, a lot of what we do is very new. You know, we were set up as mayoral combined authorities, the first ones in the country. We're still very much, 3 years in, still very much finding our feet in some of those issues as to the extent of our powers. There's been a lot of talk about increasing the work and the role of the combined authorities through the levelling up provisions that we heard a lot about last year, and waiting to hear about whether that is taken forward in a devolution white paper this year. So I think that there is a changing nature of a combined authority, not just for us, but for the others in the country. And then we've seen some more combined authorities coming on stream in the last sort of 6 months or so. So I think this is very much the way that government was headed pre-COVID.
Yeah, thank you. And the organisational reasons, as you've described, I think I understand. It was the advice I was given that we would also need to think about how the internal audit plan worked in the future, given the changing nature of some of the priorities. And I wondered if things like the things when we're thinking about what should be on it, like Mike Davey mentioned, you know, there was a lot of lessons to be learned, how the flexibility of the decision making and governance went on. Should we be thinking that having a look at how effective that was and what we don't? Are those the sort of items that we need to bear in mind when we get to look at a plan next time we meet? Kim, you need to unmute.
Apologies, Chair. Yes, I think there is. I think COVID has changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and I think we have had to respond. We had to respond very quickly, as most authorities did. In fact, you know, we completely appreciate that most authorities had much greater pressures than we did as a combined authority, and had to respond very quickly. So it is very much a developing role in that way. Is there any concern, Chair, that the way in which the governance was rolled out, or the immediate response to the changes in governance, did not involve the audit committee? Is there a response? Is there a concern around that, or?
No, it was just that when I was briefed on the rethink about internal audit, the emphasis was made about the difference, the different working behaviours might affect the sort of things that we'd like internal audit to look at. That was all. There was no, I hadn't really thought of it in the context of the way Mike David raised it until the discussion this morning. I've got David Brown wants to speak. David?
Thank you, Chairman. Kim, if I was sort of hearing Mike right, what we've been doing in all our authorities is, yes, we've had to take urgent decisions, but then we've been reporting those back as to what decision was taken and why. And second guessing what Mike was saying, I think we should have been seeing that from the combined authority as well.
to speak to that. Sorry, Kim, unless you want to go in.
I was actually just going to say this. This is probably a matter for the monitoring officer.
So, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I was going to speak. Chair, you know, I've been with the Combined Authority for a very little amount of time, but actually one thing that I've been very impressed with is that unlike a lot of authorities, local authorities, in terms of decision making, which have relied upon very general powers and general discretions to particularly chief officers, to get an extremely wide range of decisions made, including in the regulatory context. Actually, the Combined Authority has retained the structure, as it were, of decision making in meetings almost wholly. I know at the start, when a meeting was called on the first day of lockdown, efforts were made to put decisions into the public setting. And part of that was using the mayoral power to make decisions. That was still a decision in public, albeit not necessarily a public decision. So I've been very impressed actually that those urgency arrangements have not been particularly pressed and sweated in this context. Clearly work has been very busy, but actually lots of decisions have been falling into you know, that have been made. Lots of decisions have been made, and that they've been made in the setting of meetings, and I think the record should show that.
Thank you, Robert. Are there any other comments or questions or points? Tony Mason.
Yeah, perhaps I misheard, but when Kim was talking about the local transport plan, she mentioned that there were two major decisions, and she went and talked about the CAM, but didn't come to a second decision. And then, I mean, it's one of the significant decisions I feel was the relocation of the actual building in which the Combined Authority is going to be in place, moving back to Ely, and that wasn't something that was discussed as an update either. If you have some input on that, that's the decision-making process.
Yes, sorry if I probably didn't make myself clear, Councillor Mason, on the first point. So the local transport plan was the first decision. We adopted the local transport plan. Of course, that includes provision about the CAM. But secondly, there was a separate decision to go to consultation on the CAM about the locations of the proposed stations in and around Cambridge city centre as we move towards the outline business case for the tunnelled section of the CAM. So those were the two main decisions relating to transport issues in January. In relation to your second point on the accommodation, and just to reinforce the point that Robert was making, there is very little decision making made by officers at the Combined Authority. This is because we took the decision very early that rather than rely on officer decision making for urgent decisions, which was necessary in most councils, the Mayor had a general power of competence, and we could still effect all of that decision making in public by the Mayor making and operating his general power of competence in public. So he called board meetings effectively where the board were still voting, but effectively the decisions were all taken by the Mayor. Now, in relation to the accommodation, that is an operational decision that can be made by the Chief Executive under the Constitution as to signing the heads of terms for the accommodation. We would have ordinarily brought that to the notice of the leaders through an informal discussion at an early stage, and then moved to a timetable for a public report. The accommodation issue arose because we were advised that the prospective tenants wanted an immediate decision about whether we would be prepared to move, and we were given effectively 2 days in which to make that decision. So although that was our decision as chief execs, we immediately contacted the Mayor, who then contacted all of the leaders individually to explain the position we were in and asked if we would support us going further to sign a heads of terms to look at the release of the accommodation at Auchenbury. And that was largely agreed by the members. I then subsequently had an informal sort of Q&A with them to go through the reasons why we'd made those decisions. And just so that you're aware, no formal decision yet has been made to surrender the lease. That decision will be made when the board next meets, and there will be a public report going into the board explaining the full reasoning behind the accommodation. It's just that for real reasons of urgency, we were asked to make a decision at very short notice about whether we would take that next step to agree the heads of terms for a potential surrender. I trust that answers your questions.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any other?
Yeah, could I just get clarification, Chairman, for something Kim said? I think she, in terms of the accommodation, I'm only curious as to the powers of the mayor here. The mayor, you said, he spoke to the individual leaders, the other members of the board, if and presumably got general agreement on that, but if they had disagreed with that decision to move and wanted to retain the lease at Alconbury, could the mayor have just made that decision on his own anyway? That makes sense, Kim?
It makes absolute sense. The answer in the abstract is potentially, technically, yes. But I think that what we saw from the mayor calling the board meeting to exercise his general power of competence, that he rarely does anything or makes any decisions without consulting the entire board, and especially on something as important as this. And just so that you're also aware, we do actually record any officer decisions that we make, and they go onto a register which goes onto the website. So you can, even though we had to make a decision at very short notice, we still nonetheless drew up a decision notice and published that so that members of the public were aware about the decision that was being made by the authority as well.
Thank you, Chairman. I was aware of the register. It makes good sense. Obviously, one has to record where decisions are made on behalf of the authority. Thanks.
Mark, yep, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, I think I heard you right, Kim, but I just want to clarify something. Were you saying that the meeting was called because 2 days were given by the outgoing lease at Alconbury, or 2-day notice was required by the acquiring lease at Ely?
No, just to be clear, this is my discussion has been around the release of the lease at Alconbury, and it was the tenant who wanted to come into the premises that we are currently occupying. So they wanted to have the guarantee from us that before they made any further preparations for the move, that we were actually committed to moving, and that's why they contacted us and said they gave us a deadline for making that decision. In relation to the prospective accommodation, we are at the moment undertaking an options paper to look at options for both temporary accommodation around the area and also for permanent accommodation around the area. Of course, in the interim, the mayor is based at Ely at the moment, and it is therefore likely that our postal address for the combined authority will become Ely. But there is no decision yet made as to where our permanent or temporary accommodation will be, and the members will be considering options paper around the various options that there are for the move for staff.
Okay, that's as I thought. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments? Kim, thank you very much indeed for that, and to members for managing to make sure we stuck to our knitting and it was about the processes. But I think it, rather than whatever the decisions might have been, but I think it was very reassuring to have that insight and and the openness in about the way these decisions are made, and particularly when there has to be done relatively quickly. Thank you. Are we happy to move on to the statement of the accounts? Okay, the statement of the accounts is when we originally set up the meeting, it would have been the meat of the meeting because of the timelines. The timelines have changed a bit, as we'll hear from John. But nevertheless, this is we should spend as much time as we think is needed in order to try and understand where we are on these matters and on the governance statement. So I think I'm going to ask John Alsop to introduce and talk us through it. And with a bit of luck, he'll be able to share screen on some of the pages. John, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So the purpose of this report and this workshop session is for committee members to receive and review the draft statement of accounts for the Combined Authority for 2019-20. Members will have received an initial version on Friday, but this has been updated over the weekend, and apologies for the late arrival of the updated version last night. And hopefully that version that we will go through in a few moments will have cleared out some of the issues that we had on the initial version. But that initial version really was to give you a flavour of the accounts. So I'll go through the updated version and highlight where there have been any material changes from the version previously circulated. Obviously, in previous years, members will, a lot of these members will have attended those sessions before, but we've done that as a workshop session, an interactive session. We'll try and do that again this year, but it may be a bit difficult doing it remotely. So apologies in advance if things are not clear on the screen as I go through it. But please, if we can, I welcome any questions. So please stop me, ask questions as we go along. Hopefully we have Rob Emery, our Chief Accountant, also available to answer some of the more technical questions. And Robert Parkin may also want to say something about the annual governance statement when we come to that part. I would say, just for background, that that due to the impact of COVID-19 on local authorities and finance teams, the deadlines for publishing the draft accounts have been moved back. So so now that the deadline for publishing the draft accounts is the 31st of August, whilst it was 31st of May, and the deadline for the publishing of the final audited version of the accounts is now the 30th of November. And again, previously that was 31st of July. So there are still some sections of the draft accounts that are not complete. The most significant of that is to do with the pension scheme. So this is the first year that the Combined Authority has had employees who are members of the local government pension scheme. So in local authority accounts, there is usually an actuarial valuation of the assets and liabilities of the scheme that is provided to the local authority so that it can update its accounts and draft notes according to the to those figures and calculations. We only received the actuarial report on Thursday of last week, and we do have some outstanding questions on those numbers that we need to be resolved. So that the draft accounts will not be ready for publishing by the 31st of May. But as I say, the intention is, or the deadline has been pushed forward, so that shouldn't be an issue. But once we have received all the outstanding information, then an updated version will be published on the website with the notice of the public inspection requirement, which gives members of the public the opportunity to comment on the draft accounts and to ask questions. And that is a period of 30 working days. The audit is currently underway, and the Ernst & Young will hopefully be along later to give you an update on the progress against that. So the intention then is to bring back the final audited accounts for review and sign off by the committee at the July committee meeting. So I'm, I think Councillor Brown wanted to raise a question.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Sharon. You talked about publication on the website. The initial set, which I wasn't very impressed with, as some people know, have been published on the website. Can I have the assurance that they've now been changed to this second set that came out at 11:30 last night? Because, quite frankly, that first set should never have gone on the website.
Well, I'll ask Robert Fox to, if it hasn't been done already, perhaps Robert, if you could arrange for that to be updated on the website.
So obviously these ones only came through at 11:30 last night, and I wasn't aware of them being until I opened my email account at 8:30 this morning. So as yet they've not been updated, but they will be updated post this meeting.
Matt McGuire.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to interrupt John at this stage, but as he's already stopped anyway, can I just, first of all, comment, if our updated draft report came in last night, I have to admit I haven't seen that this morning, I haven't highlighted mine, but I'm not sure that's not terribly important. I can catch up with that later. But the second part of it is, given the extension of the period as a result of COVID, am I being cynical by suggesting that the likes of Ernst & Young and other auditors around for some of the other authorities are going to be still able to meet the deadlines given the problems we had last year?
Well, that's a good question. As you know, the auditors will be, there isn't a separate agenda item on that, so it may be a question for them. But certainly we've been working with them to manage some of the issues that we were already aware of. They have planned their audits so that that different local authorities are put in slots, and they've been timed so that they have the best chance of being able to deliver on all of the audit commitments that they've got. So, and a lot of work that we can do in advance of the audit, we have been able to, well, we've been engaging with the auditors in order to be able to extend the time period for the preparation of the accounts and the work that they've been doing on them. Because we are one of the, relatively speaking, we're one of the simpler audits. We've been put in the first tranche of audits, which means that they have already started their work. So they started on the 18th of May. So it is quite a tight turnaround. They've also said that in order to be able to give consistency to all the local authorities, they won't be releasing any audit opinions until sometime probably in September, just to make it fair for those audits which are going to be conducted later on in the phasing process. But yes, I mean, it will be difficult for auditors to be able to manage things remotely, but we've already started, and the process has gone well so far. So we are optimistic that we will be able to get the accounts completed and the audit done satisfactorily and in a timely fashion. But again, it's probably worth having a conversation with the auditors later on in the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and share my screen, and this version of the accounts would be the ones that were circulated last. It's got host disabled participant screen share. So Sue, I think is that something that you can do to switch the ownership of the meeting to me, so that I can. Sorry, you're on mute. So.
Yes, okay. I'll make you co-host then, John, so that you can actually access that. You can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Can find you. You should be able to do it now, John.
Ah, yes, thank you.
I think when, oh, okay, fine. You just have to maybe send me a chat if during John's talk you want to ask a question, because I won't be able to see you all automatically on the screen.
Thank you. Right, I'll scroll down. Apologies if this is I'm not sure what other people can see. So apologies if this isn't very clear. So we start off. There are, as members may recall from previous workshops, the financial statements are essentially split into three parts. So the first part is the narrative report. The second part is the financial statements and the notes themselves, and the third part is the annual governance statement. And given that the members will have seen these before, I'll try and stick to just the main points and anything which is significant or different from previous years. So in terms of the narrative report, this essentially provides background information on the authority. It sets out its main objectives and strategies and how the authority has used its resources, and how it's equipped to deal with the challenges as ahead. Many of these paragraph titles are set in recommendations from that we need to follow. So the second section here is on organisational overview and the external environment. So it gives details of the membership of the board, a background to the business board, the fact that we have co-opted member status from Police and Crime Commissioner, the Fire Authority, and the Clinical Commissioning Group. The main change in this year is the creation or the establishment of 3 executive committees, which was amended in the Constitution to enable this in September 2019. These are the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, the Skills Committee, and the Housing and Communities Committee. So the Combined Authority Board will still decide on the strategic direction of the authority, but some of the decision-making powers have now been delegated to those 3 committees. In terms of governance, so we'll talk about the annual governance statement later on, but the authority is responsible for putting in place proper arrangements for the governance of its affairs. And in May 2019, the Business Board and the Combined Authority Board have now approved a revised single assurance framework, which covers both of those bodies, and this has now been approved by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. In terms of the operational model, sets down the main points of the devolution deal and the key ambitions of the Combined Authority. Then we have a section on risks and opportunities, and there has been some recent guidance from SIPFA on what should be included within the narrative report on COVID-related issues. So it suggests that we include the impact of the lockdown, and critically on the financial sustainability of the organisation. So I think as Kim mentioned earlier on, in March, the Combined Authority set out its initial response to COVID-19. The main point from that was that the Combined Authority would remain open for business. We are, as an organisation, as employees, we are fully able to work from home. Meetings taking place virtually. And again, as Kim mentioned earlier on, the Mayor's general power of competence was relied on in the early days in order to make decisions. So we have been focusing on supporting local businesses. So we've been redesigning, repurposing resources towards providing a rapid response to support businesses. We've been supporting businesses to access information, for example, in how to access central government support packages. And we've been allocating grant funding for short-term capital grants for COVID recovery, both for small businesses and more recently for micro businesses. We are also going through a refresh of the medium-term financial plan to look at.
Sorry, John, can I just ask a question before you get on to that?
Yeah.
When I read this, some of the COVID work started in the old financial year, which is the subject of these accounts.
Yeah.
And much of it will continue into the new financial year. Does this make or sufficient distinction between what was achieved or done before the end of the previous financial year or are the two blurred in there? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, well, it's both relevant. So in terms of the narrative report sets the context, but also what's important, I think, about COVID-19 is to give reassurance of going concern and the future sustainability of the business. As members will know, that a number of the constituent councils and local authorities across the country have some real issues in income, so council tax, business rates, also parking, and some of the commercial ventures have taken a real hit, and the ability for local authorities to implement saving measures. We as a combined authority are quite fortunate in a respect, in that a lot of our revenue is grant, so we're not as exposed to the impacts of COVID-19 as some other local authorities. So it's in that context, really, in terms of future sustainability, that we include it here.
Now, I thank you for that, but I still think the wording could be developed a bit to make it clear of what actually happened because this is, the accounts are the record of the previous financial year, and giving readers a insight of what will happen in the next financial year. I just think the wording could make those two aspects clearer when you develop this further.
Okay, I'll make those amendments. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Sorry, carry on, please.
Okay. Yes, so we are looking at the current priorities and the medium-term financial plan to reprioritise, and the focus being in terms of future that we will make sure that whatever changes are made to the local authorities budget and the MTFP, that the budget will remain balanced and do not affect the medium or long-term operational viability of the combined authority. Just moving on, I think a lot of this is similar to what was provided in previous years. The next section is strategy and resource allocation, which again sets out the main strategies of the combined authority, the local industrial strategy, spatial framework, skills strategy, local transport plan. In terms of the business plan, that has been developed so that during in September there was a refresh of the business plan and the medium-term financial plan, with 6 new projects included as additional to the key projects. Fenland stations regeneration to promote more frequent and later services. Bus review task force to implement the recommendations and findings of the 2018 strategic bus review, We've recently taken on responsibilities for the adult education budget. Community land trusts is in there now, the 100k homes, and the business board in particular in terms of the delivery of the local industrial strategy. In terms of outlook, we have, I think that Kim has given an update on where the combined authority is now, and the final section there is in terms of the basis of preparation of preparation and presentation of the financial statements themselves, and gives an overview of the main core of the financial statements. So there we have the statement of responsibilities, and we'll go through those in a moment. So if we move on then to the next section, so the independent auditor's report, that will be provided once the accounts have been audited by Ernst & Young. The next section is on the statement of responsibilities for the account. So essentially that sets out the combined authority's responsibilities, and also the section 73 officer responsibilities, which is to ensure the preparation of the accounts is done in accordance with proper practices, that we've got suitable accounting policies, that any judgments made are reasonable and prudent, they comply with the local authority code, and that we keep proper accounting records, and we have taken reasonable steps to prevent fraud and other irregularities. And again, these are to be signed off once the accounts have been completed, and to be signed off by the Chief Financial Officer and the Chair of the Audit Committee.
Yeah, can I just, sorry, John, sorry, John, and I'm just keen to ensure that we have clarity. So, and I think John's has alluded to it. Paragraph 2.6 of the report does refer to the onward process, whereby Ernst & Young, as the external auditors, will have sight of these draft accounts. There'll be some further work, and indeed, John mentioned the chair of this committee signing them off. Actually, my understanding is that they would come back to this committee. So whilst members, I fully understand the frustration of the late notice of the drafts coming through, I think the intention of this paper is foresightedness, commentary, but with a hand on, as it were, the handrail of knowing that this is going to be there's going to be further work on this, and indeed that it will be returned to the committee. I hope that assists a little.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, and I was going to, when we finish this item, but we could discuss it a bit here, is when will the committee get a proper, I mean, this is a sort of an education session and a where we're at session, and to put things in our mind about what, before we get to the approval stage. John, do you have where do you think we will be, when do you think we'll be getting these the statements for approval?
Well, the final version will come to the committee in July, and that's when we'll be asking yourself to sign those off. But all of the audit work should have been completed by then. So any changes that have come as a result of the audit work, any changes that we need to make due to information which we haven't had yet, those will all be included in that final version. So, for example, the pensions adjustments and the pensions notes.
Okay, thank you. And are you confident that we will have this for us to look at in proper time before the meeting on the 31st of July? Because I don't think we could address the challenge of approval if it was at the 11th hour.
Yes, that's what we will be intending to do. That's the intention.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first of the schedules that we've got here is the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. This shows on the left-hand side here is the 2018 comparative figures. On the right here in green, the 2019 figures. These show the accounting cost in the year of providing the services provided. And it shows all expenditure and all income applied, and in this top section, all income applied against that expenditure. For example, where housing, the expenditure is greater than income, on this row here, that's because the housing income was drawn down from existing balances. For example, in terms of the Cambridge City £70 million fund. So expenditure is 12.5 million, with income which has been received during the course of the year offset against that. Anything which is any additional income which has not been applied, i.e. not specifically relating to any of these expenditure headings, is shown beneath the line here, and the financing and investment income and expenditure, and in terms of taxation and non-specific grant income. So the reason why on here it's got that it's restated is that previously, in the previous financial year, we needed to separate out the LEP costs as a newly integrated business unit within the combined authority, but that was only needed to be shown separately for 1 year only. The finance income here is the interest that we have received on treasury balances. The expenditure here sets out the overall costs and related income of all the main operational and business divisions by functional areas in terms of the directorates. The income down here is, the charge to income expenditure down here is to do the revaluation of the combined authorities' investment in medtech. The overall, this shows that in year there is a net surplus to the within the income expenditure statement of 11.2 million. So that takes all the expenditure that we've had in year, all of the income that has been received in year that it relates to that expenditure, and any other income that we have received in year. Moving down, the next table is the MERS statement, movement in reserve statement. So this shows the movement for each of the main types of funds that we hold between the beginning of during the course of the year. So the top section again is the comparators from last year, and the bottom section here is shaded in green, is the movement in the current financial year. So the general fund balance, that is made up of our revenue gain share, which is the core revenue funding that the combined authority receives in year, and the mayoral capacity fund, which is just for 2 years only. So this last year has been the final year of that fund. Earmarked general fund reserves, those are for specific types of expenditure. So we have the election provision fund there, the local government, local LGF top slice, the AEB, that's the adult education budget reserve, and we also have a contingency reserve of £1 million, which is held in that area there. Capital grants unapplied account, that includes the 100 million and the 70 million pound housing funds, capital gain share, and local growth fund. Unusable capital receipts, those are usable capital receipts, those are from recycled growing places fund and the recycled housing fund. So for example, where we have made loans to organisations, including housing developers, that comes back in as recycled funds. And then unusable reserves. That includes for example, any receipts that we've received in advance. So, for example, the Transforming Cities Fund is shown in here, and it's essentially a timing difference reserve. The main figure, so you can see that in terms of the balances that we've currently got is 170 odd million, but that if you look at the total usable reserve, the drop from 155 million at the end of last year to 135 million is an indication that the combined authority is using up its balances. As you know, the medium-term financial plan is over 4 years, and that shows how the authority's reserves will be used in terms of its capital programme in particular, and other projects over the course of the 4 years. So that's just an indication of that we are starting to use up some of those balances. And this figure here, the 11.2, that is the link between the movement in reserves statement and the comprehensive income and expenditure statement on the previous page. The balance sheet, that's much more of a hopefully a more familiar table to people who are more familiar with company accounts. So this now shows, as in previous version, didn't have the notes references, so those have now been included. In terms of property, plant and equipment, that has gone up since last year. You'll know that the combined authority doesn't, as a matter of course, have much in the way of assets. It usually is the provider of funds to other organisations to develop other people's assets, but that now includes the office equipment and also the design of stage of the University of Peterborough. Long-term investments, that's the medtech investment. In terms of long-term debtors, those will include, that's gone up considerably since last year, so that includes the housing loans that we have got out, and that would be, in terms of long-term, that is for greater than 1 year. Short-term debtors, that is less than a year, and the short-term investments, that is less than 3 months. Sorry, between 1 year and 3 months, and that includes treasury balances. And the cash and cash equivalents, that is any balance that we have which has a maturity of less than 3 months. In terms of creditors, those are made up of receipts in advance in revenue, and also accruals and grant claims that are in the process of being paid out, and the capital grant receipts in advance. Again, that's only capital grants that we will have received in advance of the year in which they are relate to. And again, these usable reserves and unusable reserves, those relate back to the summary or the MERS table that we've just looked at. In terms of cash flow statement, again, this is, has been updated since the previous version that was circulated. This essentially, and again, this is a table which is similar to what you might see in company accounts, but that just shows the changes between cash balances in the course of the year. So it's effectively a recasting of the balance sheet. And then we come on to the notes of the accounts. Again, a lot of these won't have changed since the previous financial year. So I'll whiz through those, unless anybody's got any points they would like to make or any questions. The expected credit loss model, this is something which is new for this year, and this is an estimation of how any of our loans, how those might be impacted. And it gives a it quantifies the risk of borrowers defaulting on their loan obligations. Again, moving forward, there's again these are fairly standard notes which won't have changed since last time, and then we come to the breakdown of some of the notes that we need to include within the accounts. So in terms of audit costs, member allowances, officers' remuneration. Again, this is one section which we just need to confirm. Then we come to again more detail in from some of the main statements. So breakdown here of the within the income and expenditure statement. So non-specific grant income. So the top section there is non-specific received in year, and then underneath that, it's in terms of the capital grants and contributions. Then we have the related parties. So again, it sets out income received from various government departments, and also expenditure and balances at year end with our constituent councils. Then we have a section on the expenditure and income broken down by type of expenditure and type of income. Then we have the expenditure and funding analysis. And again, this gives more information, provides a breakdown of movements against the general fund. And highlights the differences in treatment between funding and accounting basis, which is something again to local authority accounting, and it gives some notes on what that means, and again further detail. A lot of these notes are necessary to be included in our set of accounts, but probably are but maybe a bit more relevant to a more orthodox local authority. Again, further breakdown of the usable and unusable reserves, and again the more information on the capital adjustment account. Financial instruments revaluation reserve. Again, this is the investment in medtech. This is a breakdown on property and plant and equipment. The capital expenditure and capital financing. This shows all of the capital expenditure that's been incurred and how that is to be funded, and the fact that it is a zero balance at the bottom there indicates that we do not have nothing that we have done in terms of expenditure has needed to have been funded by borrowing. So our capital financing requirement is nil. Then a breakdown of information again that's a requirement, a SIPFA requirement on operating leases and financial instruments, breaks down the interest income that we have received. And again, more information on on debtors, creditors, financial assets. Then we have a narrative on credit risk, price risk. So these are things which are also included within our treasury management strategies. A breakdown of debtors, and again, as mentioned previously, this the majority of those are to do with the housing and other loans that we have provided to developers. Again, some of these I think we can probably tidy up by taking out some of the lines which are not relevant to us. And the some of the supporting schedules here for support the cash flow statements, so investing activities, cash and cash equivalents. We have recently set up, and again that's going to be a separate paper on the committee, two new companies, one being Angle Holding Limited, which is a subsidiary company to the combined authority. Because it has not yet started trading, a decision was made not to consolidate those companies in with the combined authority's main accounts, on the grounds that it's not material and wouldn't add to the understanding of the reader of the accounts. But obviously in future years, those we will be doing group accounts once those companies start trading. Then we have a glossary of terms, and that's the end of the main part of the accounts. I'll stop there in case there's any other questions that any of the members would like to, or comments in terms of the presentation, or anything that that others would like to see in the accounts or the narrative statement, or if there's any other comments to make.
I'd welcome comments from members.
Okay.
Do you want to speak? Tony Mays?
Yeah, sorry, it went blank there, yes. I just wondered if there's any discussions around any post-balance sheet events, disclosures, and again, I'm thinking back to the whether there's been any lease termination or costs incurred with the potential relocation.
No, at the moment there is. I mean, obviously we do review everything that's happened after the end of the financial year, but yeah, there's nothing material that we're aware of that needs to be included within as a post-balance sheet event.
I mean, as you're aware, I'm involved in the preparation of accounts, and certainly the FDA are requiring, and I know you've discussed it in the earlier part of the account, but we have been required to publish a post-balance sheet event as well on the impacts of COVID.
Right, okay. Well, I'll certainly take that away. We'll have a discussion with our auditors. You know, they're aware of everything that's going on. We've had a number of conversations with Suresh and the rest of the EY team. So we'll certainly get their advice on if there's anything that we need to include within the accounts as post-balance sheet events or anything else. So yes, we'll certainly look into that.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I've got my
John,
hand.
I've got one if you've got, sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. I'm just wondering whether I might be missing something here, because whilst I've got no problems with the layout and everything of what looks a very comprehensive and very well presented document, I'm just questioning what our role is here, because to receive the initial document at 9:15 on Friday evening of a bank holiday weekend, and then the other one at 11:30 last night, which is quite a considerable changes, and then to be able to audit and supply and investigate governance on it first thing this morning, I don't really think it's given the members of this committee a fair crack. So I just really like from you, Chair, and from you, John, as to, you know, what is it that you're expecting of us this morning based on the lateness of these, the lateness to us of this information.
Well, it's always been, sorry, Chair.
Perhaps if I could just first, I think my sense of getting to this meeting is that there's been a scramble to complete all the paperwork in time. I was not expecting a final update, but my view of what this was about is for us to tour the shape of the accounts whilst they're in this developing form, so that we can understand the significance of the various entries, so that when we get to the approval stage, we have a better understanding in our minds of the things that we should be focusing on. I am sorry that we weren't able, or it wasn't. I'm sorry that the changes were made at the last minute. That was not the intention, but it is an indicator, I think, of the challenges being faced. But I'll ask John to talk more now about why we're getting something so late and why it was he decided again to send it out last night.
Well, it's always in the past we've always had these sessions as being workshop sessions, just to go through the accounts, what they look like, what the numbers relate to. It's just really for information and an opportunity for members to comment on. For example, I think in the past we've had comments about what to include in the narrative report. So it's really for information for the most part. It is a tight turnaround. This is the first time that we as a team have done these accounts. As you mentioned earlier on, the service level agreement with Peterborough City Council has come to an end, and one of the consequences of that is that that they, whereas in the past they have done these accounts, now it's being done in-house. But yes, it's always been the intention that this is a first showing. It is quite a quick turnaround in terms of getting the accounts up to a point where we can share them with you. Apologies that there have been more than one version of the accounts that has been provided over the last few days. Intention was that the first set would give you a flavour of the accounts. We thought it would be useful, maybe against better judgment now, for members to have sight of the accounts rather than produce something which was on the day tabled, so and not being able to give you the opportunity to at least get an impression of the numbers and some of the narrative behind the numbers. So going forward, we obviously take your comments and any guidance that you can provide in how we can do this this better going forward. But yes, the intention is for us now to go through the audit process and to get a signed off set of accounts that we can bring back to you in July.
Yeah, I think if I can just come back on that, as I said, I think the general layout and the content within the report, I haven't got a problem with. It's really about membership of this committee and what we're expected to do. And a 60-page document on the Friday of a weekend for a Monday meeting is that's a big ask. To get that again last night with quite considerable changes for today. So it was, and I think that's fair. I can take both John's answers there, and we can move forward. But I think the point is raised that I'm sure I speak for all the members of this committee. We all like to be as prepared and as ready for good questions and good audit discussions as we can. And I don't feel we have been on this particular case.
Thank you, Mark. I think those are points well made. One of the timing issues has been in the past when the accounts have to go onto the website, which was, I think, first week in June. That's why we had to have this meeting. And whilst we've been on that track, then we've seen that the rules on timing and publication have changed. I think the finance team need to have a real deep think of what is the best sequence that can meet their needs and ours. I think there's still a value in having, shall we say, an early look, not in the middle of the night look, but an early look the next time round, because that allows us to pick at things which are still being developed. Whereas when we go to the approval stage, without the benefit of the early look, wouldn't make it so easy. I think there are a couple of points I also got for John. One was, I'm not sure I picked up in your briefing where the pension issues properly emerged. So if you could refresh me again on that, because I did lose a bit of connectivity. And when we get to the around page 26, which talks about remuneration and exit packages and allowances, this seems to be, I think my recollection there was more underpinning detail in there, and whether we need it again or not, I don't know. But what's struck me, these are the areas where the Joe public will have a look rather more than the forensic accountant. And I just hope that you put enough in there. For instance, I wasn't aware that, or if I was aware, I'd forgotten that there was a large exit package, large-ish exit package during this year, and whether or not there need to be some notes in that regard, which could explain it sufficiently to fend off requests for further information. So the two things, I missed the pension bit. Could you just remind me, and could you think about the need for some contextual notes on the areas of remuneration and exit?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. So in terms of the pension issues, as I say that towards the beginning of last year, there was a transfer of staff who were originally, because the combined authority hadn't been set up as an employer, a number of staff, 22 of them, were employed by Peterborough City Council. They had Peterborough City Council contracts, but were working for the combined authority. So during the course of the year, as the combined authority has become an employer, it needs to have its own pension within the local government pension. So both the combined authority and Peterborough are both members of the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund, but a number of individuals needed to be transferred across from the Peterborough element into the combined authority element. And I think there has been some work done by the actuaries, but for whatever reason, and this is something that we will be investigating, we hadn't had the information on the actual valuation of the potential assets and liabilities that are associated with the transfer of staff and also new employees who have joined the pension fund. So it's just a question of making sure that we are, and then to get the information both in terms of the numbers that need to feed into the accounts, but also in terms of the notes that go with those. So it gives an indication of where how the assets have been valued and how the liabilities attached to the members in the pension scheme, how those liabilities have been calculated. So it's just we're just waiting on information from the actuaries for that. In terms of the remuneration of well, the whole of that section, yes, we will. That's the one area. The other area that there's still a bit of work. You're right. We absolutely did not want to get that wrong before putting the numbers in, which is why it's to be completed. So yeah, so we will look at that and complete that over the next week or so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members or comments?
Please, Chair. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate John's point about Section 6, not just about the people leaving, but also the people who are still there. I think it'd be really helpful to have clarity, because as John has already indicated, I think that's a likely area of questioning. And to pick up Councillor Goldsack's point, and forgive me if I've missed this, but the area that I think I'd like to see a bit more detail on is about the loans under section, I think it's 24. So the point that there have been loans of, I think now in total 38 million is fine. Unless I've missed it, and this is back to Mark's point, not having read it properly, I think it'd be helpful to have details to who the loans were to, because that invariably, I suspect, will prompt further questions, and I have to say, not least from myself. But forgive me if I've missed it. I'm sorry. I just haven't had time to go through the whole thing in detail. But more detail on both the remuneration and the loans would be really welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chairman, it's Max speaking. Can I come in?
Please do. Yes, it's a bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're using the blue hand bit. I did put it up, but
okay. Well, I can't really.
You can't necessarily see them.
John, if you want to stop sharing your screen, we'll be able to see each other then.
Yeah, that was the other point I was going to ask. But while I'm speaking, I just wanted to. It's moved on a little bit, but I just wanted to support what Mark Goldsack was saying, because, you know, I've got another screen in front of me where I've got all the agenda items coming up. But of course, I was looking at the old version of the report, so there's lots of TBCs on it. But given that one of our main roles is to challenge, I do think we need more time in advance of meetings, notwithstanding all the problems everybody's had in doing this. But even for a virtual meeting, to try to read through what is on a, you know, to all extents and purposes, a very good looking report. I quite like it. To have big gaps in it, and obviously I can't go back and look at the new version at this stage, or if I can, I'm not sure how to do it. But as I say, you know, just in support of what Mark Goldsack says, if we could have the papers much further in advance than we have had this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. John, also, when we get the final version to look at, my recollection was in previous years there might have been a bit of Hobson's choice, take it or leave it. will we be able to provide input which affects the accounts before they are published at the 31st of July meeting, or is it going to be it's take it or leave it?
Well, sorry, they will have been substantially audited by then, but the auditors will not have released their final audit opinion until September. So yes, there will be an opportunity to review it and to make changes then if you wanted to. But we would hope that that everything would have been ironed out by then. But certainly, I mean, yeah. Certainly we can send a version of those accounts much out to committee members in advance of the meeting, so you will have a lot more time to look at the accounts then.
David?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I copied you on an email earlier on. Can I please ask that we don't just get it when they're published like a week before, because we can clear up so much time within the meeting if we've had the opportunity to feed in writing before and give you time to get another version out before the actual meeting, because we're talking about now at the end of July, so let's have it just to committee members.
Yeah. Okay.
First week, second week in July, with us being tasked to, if you've got points that need to be debated, but things like we could do with more clarity on the exit packages, that could all be sorted out before the meeting, and it'll save us all a lot of time within the meeting arguing about that kind of stuff.
Kim?
Thank you, Chair. I'm obviously hearing a lot of concerns about the report. I think there are some operational issues around this. I'll take these away with the team, certainly. I hear what you say about wanting much more time to be able to examine the accounts, and we will ensure that happens prior to the next meeting.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else? Okay, I'll draw this item to a close, and then it'll be 10 to 11, and I thought we might take a 10-minute break, and then when Suresh joins us, we can do external. I think in the summing up in the record, I'd ask Robert Fox to make sure we capture the concerns of the members to have this information in good time, so that we're not forced to make it up on the hoof. Those aren't the words for the minutes, but you know what I mean. That we welcome the intention of the Chief Executive Officer to examine the operational issues which would enable us to see the accounts earlier, before the 31st of July. That we welcome the thought from Councillor Brown that the accounts could be circulated privately to the members well in advance for any feedback on general points to simplify discussion at the meeting on the 31st of July. And we note that there was still an option for input from the committee which would affect the accounts if we felt there was anything necessary to want to be put in there when we meet on the 31st of July. Do members feel I've captured the things that are important to be on record?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Shall we take, it's 10 to 11. Shall we take 10 minutes out and reconvene at 11, hopefully with Ernst & Young with us?
Can I just say something, John? Can I just say something, John, before you all leave? Can you leave your stay logged into Zoom, but if you could just mute and put your audio so that your video off, so that nobody can see, because obviously the recording is still going on. So that way then you're still in the meeting, but you've got no one can see or hear you. Okay?
Okay, we happy? 11 o'clock. Bing.
John, just for your information, we need to finish the meeting by about 12 o'clock. Is that going to be okay?
No, it wasn't really the plan.
What sort of, what time did you need? What time were you hoping to stay till?
Well, another hour.
Yeah, it was 11 o'clock now. So you wanted
No, I
to
meant another hour after 12. That's what was the published time.
till 1 o'clock. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I wasn't aware that it was till 1 o'clock. Let me check to see if it's going to be possible to do it till 1. I'll see if it's possible to do it till 1 o'clock.
Okay, well, or certainly more than 12, because I wanted to get as far through the agenda as we could, recognising it was a packed agenda because of the need to cancel the March meeting.
Okay.
And that's why I brought up the agenda, some of the items that definitely need to be discussed today. So I'd like to do them all, members willing, because then that's a big chunk of work behind us instead of waiting for next time. I'll leave it in your capable hands, Sue.
Okay.
Do we have any news on Suresh? Ernst & Young?
No, I've not heard from him, and he doesn't look like he's actually it doesn't look like he's logged in. But we do have it looks like we've got Dan Cook, who is also with him, and Steve Crabtree's there as well. They're both available whenever you need them.
David?
10 seconds ago, Suresh was in the list of attendees.
He's not there now.
Oh, he's disappeared now, but he was there when I started waving my hand.
Okay.
There, he's back now.
I've not got him.
In the list of attendees.
Ah.
Yes, there he is now. He's just joined again. Yeah, we're okay now.
Can we get him on screen with Ian Crabtree and whoever else from Ernst & Young?
Okay, I'll just do that now.
Suresh, welcome.
Morning.
I
think you're muted, Chair.
So thank you. We just finished our break. Are you, Suresh, able to introduce your report and external audit update?
Yep, that's fine if you want me to kick off.
That would be kind. I just remind members that our remit this morning is to consider the progress report that we're going to receive. Thank you, Suresh. Please go ahead.
Okay, so the paper that we submitted for the March committee was our audit plan for the 1920 audit, which is hopefully is in your papers. Obviously, we discussed that an issue that pre COVID-19. So what I was going to do is take you through the plan, but verbally update you where the plan has been impacted by the events of the last few months, because there are a few important areas that have kind of moved on and changed from what we said in our plan. So hopefully you've got access to the plan. If I take you through the overview of the strategy, which is page 5 of the plan, you'll see there we're kind of highlighting what our key kind of risk areas are and or areas of audit focus. So on that page 5, you'll see we've got similar risks, the first two to the previous year in terms of misstatements due to fraud and error, and also the risks around inappropriate capitalisation of revenue spent. So no real change from the prior year on those. What you'll see there is a new risk in terms of pension valuation and disclosure. So you might be aware that This is the first year that employees of the authority are part of the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund. So you will be disclosing in your accounts your associated pension liability and all the other disclosures that go with that. That's clearly something new for you, as an inherent risks around that. And I know from talking to John last week, I'm not sure if you got that information back from the pension fund yet, but clearly that will be an area of focus for us to look at. Over on page 6, we had a new area of focus there. So there's a little bit of change there as a result of COVID. First of all, is IFRS 16 on leases is being, in terms of implementation, is being put back a further year. So that is no longer an area of audit focus for the 1920 audit. We make reference there to going concern and the change in the auditing standard. Now, going concern actually is impacted in terms of COVID-19, probably more from a what we call financial resilience perspective as opposed to a going concern perspective. But and actually, in fairness to the authority, it's less of an issue for you as it is for local authorities up and down the country in terms of what is the impact of COVID-19 on your 2021, 21-22 budgets, but also your medium-term financial plan. Like I say, less of an issue for you, given the nature of your funding and what you do with that. But it is something that we will be seeking evidence for from the finance team in terms of looking at your budgets moving forward and the medium-term financial plan. And I know you are looking at the priority of where you're focusing on in terms of spending. So we will be focusing on financial resilience as an area of focus for the audit. On that page also, we make reference to the fact that you have now got 2 subsidiary companies. And I'm not sure I don't think this has changed, but at the time of writing the plan, you weren't anticipating that these would require consolidating into your accounts given the low level of activity for those 2 companies. So we just wanted to highlight that we're aware that there are those 2 companies, but they will not be consolidated into your accounts, and we're comfortable with that judgment made by finance. On value for money, we have identified one significant risk, and that's just around the capital program in terms of the scale. And if you remember, value for money conclusion looks at the arrangements you've got rather than the actual outcome. So we already have done a little bit of work around the arrangements for delivering that capital program or managing that capital program moving forward. Again, we acknowledge that some of that will probably be affected by COVID in terms of decisions that you've since made on priorities around that, but it will be an area of risk in terms of the value for money conclusion. And then finally on page 6, I've made reference there to some correspondence that we received back in October last year from a member of the public, raising some concerns around governance and accountability arrangements in terms of loans that the authority has given to East Cambridgeshire Trading Company. When I drafted this back in March, we've come to the end of our kind of procedures in response to those concerns, which involved a series of questions that I posed to the finance director, who then did provide evidence in response to those questions, and also looking at the internal audit report that we know also looked at the kind of governance and accountability arrangements around that. We will kind of report formally our findings on that as part of the audit results report, and we are following up an element of that when we come into the audit shortly. And it links into going concern, because obviously loans given to the trading company and other third parties are being looked at in terms of repayment schedules and recoverability of those loans. So that'll be, we know that's something you're factoring into your financial plans moving forward. Over on page 7, just highlight the materiality levels that we've set for the 1920 audit. Again, in light of COVID-19, we have been required to just revisit those in terms of are we happy to set those at the highest levels that they are at the moment, based on what we know in terms of how effectively your finance function has continued to operate in terms of preparing its accounts. We don't see there's any increased risk in terms of errors in your accounts, so we're happy with the 2% for planning materiality and the 75% in terms of performance materiality. So we weren't proposing to change any of those materiality figures. If I now skip to, let me just skip to the page on the timetable, which is on page 28. So as a result of COVID-19, MHCLG has actually changed the reporting requirement in terms of the date when you need to publish your draft accounts and the date when ideally you would publish your audited accounts. If you remember all the issues we had last year, so the actual deadline for you to publish your draft accounts is the end of June this year, as opposed to the end of May. And the deadline for publishing audited accounts where you can is the end of November. Ironically enough, we've already agreed that we will commence the audit. I think we've started it this week, actually. And so you've sent us a set of accounts, and obviously you're discussing those accounts, or you may have already discussed those accounts earlier. And we plan to carry out our audit over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Again, you'll be aware that we held events with chief financial officers and audit committee chairs in East of England about the timing of all our external audits of local authorities in the region. And we agreed that we would be looking to issue our auditors report sometime in September/October across the region, rather than individually reporting earlier than that. There's a little bit of an impact on COVID around that, in as much as all our audit reports that we will be issuing, and this is across the firm, have to go through an internal consultation process in terms of making sure that we are giving the right auditor report in light of all the uncertainties and challenges that COVID-19 has presented. That shouldn't hold anything up in terms of that September date for issuing your auditor report, but I just wanted to highlight that because it is an added thing that we will be doing in terms of time as well as cost. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight the fee section, which starts on page 34. Again, we've been as transparent as we can in terms of the additional fees that we're likely to incur, and those all focus on risks that I've just talked you through. But we also then talk about, which is a bit more detail on page 35 and 36, generally the pressure on fees in the public sector, and our proposal to uplift the scale fee with a view to your total audit fee being in the region of 45,000. That will be something, again, we will need to kind of revisit once we get to the end of the audit. But again, we wanted to be as transparent as we could in respect to those fees. I'll stop there, Chair, and I'm sure there's questions.
Okay, Matt McGuire.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, given that the revised dates that you've suggested, September for the audit results report, I didn't attend that meeting of Chief Fire Officers and Audit Chairman, because I do that for Hunts District Council. But I'm just wondering, how confident are EY that they are going to meet these dates? You made reference to last year's problems, and I'm just wondering what's happened to give you confidence this year that you're going to meet these dates, notwithstanding COVID and the difficulties that must in itself present, I suppose, in terms of doing things virtually. But how confident are you, particularly given you've got a 10%, was it a 10% uplift in fees?
Yeah. So the reason why we held those events with CFOs and audit committee chairs across the East of England was to come to an agreement on what we thought collectively would be a realistic schedule in terms of delivering all our local government audits in effect by the end of September, probably into October. And that scheduling then was based on our ability to resource and deliver against that longer timetable. So we are fairly confident. Like you say, COVID is throwing up some difficulties, and we're for example, we're coming to the tail end of our NHS audits, and we found that the practical reality of working remotely, whilst the technology clearly enables us to do that, things just take a bit longer. So a normal conversation you'd have by going to see one of the finance team, sitting down with them and asking them a question, clearly now takes a bit longer than it would do normally. So, and also at the moment, touch wood, none of our team have been directly impacted by COVID-19, and if clearly we did have some issues, then that would create a problem as well. But notwithstanding all that, I'm pretty confident about being able to issue your auditor's report in sort of late September, early October.
Thank you, Chairman.
So it's just to follow up that point. Did I get the impression that you're going to hold all your audit letters back until everything is done across the region? If my understanding was right, does that mean we're held up by the slowest ship in your list?
No, well, not necessarily. Well, the collective agreement was yes, rather than in terms of that scheduling, rather than the audits that we've agreed to do early, benefiting from getting an earlier auditor's report, we collectively agreed that actually, regardless of when we do the work, we'd aim to issue all the auditor's reports at the same time. But if there's an audit that for whatever reason takes longer than it was scheduled to, then that won't hold up issuing auditor's report for the majority if we manage to collectively keep to that schedule.
Okay, and sorry, just one more follow-up on that. How do we interpret your statement that you're fairly confident?
I suppose I'm just trying to be, I don't want to overpromise. And like I say, there are quite a few uncertainties around there in terms of particularly around the impact of COVID.
Okay, I think my feeling about what happened last year was it was full of surprises. So what I would ask is that we have early advice if you think you're fairly confident of September is not.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've kickstarted the audit today. We're due to finish by the end of June. So by that time, we'll be in a position to be able to tell you everything's almost, it's almost finished, bar the usual kind of outstanding items, and so that gives us confidence in terms of that September date.
Okay, and so you'll be at our meeting on the 31st of July, I take it, to give us an update?
Yeah, I don't think that's in my diary at the moment, but yeah.
Well, I'll leave you and John Alsop to work on that if there isn't a technical necessity. But either way, I'd like at the 31st of July a very clear statement from Ernst & Young as to their view about September.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that fair?
Yep, that's fair.
Okay.
John, I think you may have hit mute.
Councillor Stanford, oh, yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just for my own benefit, really, because I'm not massively familiar with accounts and things. On page 7 of the audit strategy, it talks about materiality. Could you just explain what that is?
Yeah. So an auditor's report, in essence, states that the accounts are true and fair, but at a material level. So they're not saying the accounts are 100% accurate. They are saying they're materially accurate. And we have to determine what that materiality is. And for local authorities like yourselves, we use the top of our range is 2% of your expenditure, your gross revenue expenditure. That then enables us to set thresholds for testing things in your accounts. Because again, we don't test everything. We only test items that we deem to be material that could lead to a material misstatement in your account. So that is our determination of what we consider to be material for your accounts.
Nick, does that give you the answer, or do you need a bit more?
Yeah, that's right. So what underneath it talks about performance materiality. So how does that differ from ordinary materiality?
Yeah, so the audited standards require you to set a sort of an overall materiality level, which is your 2%. But then it kind of then says, well, you have to kind of assume that there might be items that are below that if you cumulative then could lead to a material misstatement. So that performance materiality is our way of saying, well, okay, we've set it at 2%, but actually we need to drop it down a little bit in terms of then what we test, and that in effect is our kind of testing threshold, that performance materiality piece. And that can be either 75% of that headline materiality or 50% if we think there's a risk that your accounts have got errors in there based on our previous experience with you or based on risks that you might have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? We're asked to consider the report. Tony?
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, I was at the meeting in March with Suresh and the CFOs to go through the process, and I think there was a discussion in that meeting with regards to the recruitment and retention that EY were going through to be able to support the audit process. I just wanted to have an update as to how that has progressed in terms of for the wider team that perhaps weren't at the meeting there, on the retention and recruitment of the audit team within EY.
Yeah, so that has gone as well as we could anticipate, but obviously then has been impacted by COVID. But prior to COVID, we were able to get back up to the headcount that we require. We've also been able to draw on our colleagues in other parts of the business, which have been adversely affected by COVID. So actually we're in a pretty good position in terms of our resources at the moment. Notwithstanding, like I say, some of the we did have some vacancies that we weren't able to fill externally because of COVID. So people coming from overseas in particular that clearly haven't been able to do that. But we've been able to supplement that with internal resources that are now available that previously weren't available. So from a resourcing perspective, we are up to the capacity that we need to deliver these local authority audits.
Thank you, Suresh. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you again. We're asked to consider, which we have, and we welcome the progress and the promised progress, and we look forward to a positive update at our next meeting on the 31st of July. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item is internal audit. Could we have sight of Steve Crabtree? And Suresh, you're welcome to stay as long as it's of value to you.
Yeah, we'll stay for the internal audit piece.
Do we have a Steve Crabtree? No?
Yeah, he'll be there in a couple of seconds. There we go.
There you go. Right, okay.
Chair, he's on mute, so perhaps you might want to give him a prompt. And Chair, you are also on mute, although I can see that you are talking. Apologies.
There we go. Right, start again. Steve, welcome. And we've just reached your item. We looked at external audit, and the external auditors are staying with us whilst we do your item, where we are asked to, the members are asked to consider progress. So would you like to introduce your report?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. The progress report you have in front of you is all the works which was completed to the current date. What was set out is obviously in the standard progress report, the ones which have already been completed and reported on. From items 3.4 onwards are the current audits and their status. As you know, I have been listening into the meeting, and there's been a lot of comment in relation to COVID, which has impacted not just on our work, but obviously getting hold of individuals at the combined authority. So it's not as detailed as position as we would normally be. However, we are on track to deliver our annual audit opinion for the July meeting, as we did last year. In terms of the audits, which are the progress ones, if I refer you to 3.4, which is a fraud risk assessment, what we've actually done there is to look at the whole of the business of the Combined Authority and the Business Board, and to look at arrangements in place for financial transactions, contracting, IT, human resources, and we've looked at the potential impact of fraud and what steps are in place to prevent and mitigate those. We've had a number of discussions with the providers of your contracts, with your IT supplier, and we've been going through those. We've come back to a draft position now, so that report is ready and will be issued in June. In terms of governance, we also looked at the budgetary control process, and we're waiting for a number of items from the Combined Authority on that, but we've also changed the scope of that to actually look at the financial management system. It's been mentioned already that Peterborough City Council has provided a number of services, and one of those was linking in with the use of Oracle, and the Combined Authority has been looking at what arrangements should they go forward. Should they continue with Oracle or a separate package? In 3.6, we look at projects. We have done an audit of the project management framework, and I noticed that's on the agenda later today, the 10-point project management guide. So we've done an overarching review of that framework, and we're about to issue that report in mid-June. And from the works we've seen so far, that is looking very reasonable. We did have a number of projects which we were going to then sort of cascade through and look how those are actually operating, but we did have a request to curtail that work, primarily because a number of the officers from the project management office have been seconded into the hub to support the COVID response. So we've actually stopped that audit altogether. In terms of performance management in 3.8, there's quite a bit of information there where we have actually concluded that report. That should actually, if it hasn't gone out of Friday, it's imminent to go out. So we've looked at all the performance arrangements which the Combined Authority, the Business Board, and how they actually report, collect information and report on those. So we've checked the data, how it's collated, how it's collected and verified. And that report, again, we've given a reasonable assurance. On 3.9, we've looked at the skills board, and in particular, we've focused on the adult education budget. This is probably one of the areas, obviously one of the biggest spends which the authority has got, and it was a new area. So we've put some time and resource into this one. We have, and the Combined Authority have been hindered with COVID. We had a number of site visits planned to actually go out and verify how those colleges were collating the data. So with those site visits being stopped, we've actually changed the focus. One of the issues which the Combined Authority has to do is provide an assurance for a framework and government return to central government in relation to that. So we've been assisting and helping the officers within that section to come up with those conclusions and that return. We've had a couple of follow-ups. It's already been mentioned about the East Cams loan. That is due to be issued very shortly. And similarly, the LEP assurance framework, with the LEP coming into part of the Business Board last year, we did an initial look at the assurance framework. We identified a number of areas where we weren't compliant. However, it was still pretty good. The assurance framework has now been combined into the Combined Authorities, and we've just been verifying to make sure that is all okay and has covered everything. And again, we're about to report on that one, and that's going to be coming back as reasonable assurance. So the overall opinion, we will be providing for the July committee as we did last year. And at the present moment in time, we've not identified any material or significant issues. The next item we refer to is the audit plan. Now, that was due to come to obviously the committee in March, and unfortunately with that being cancelled, it never came to fruition. We have identified 180 days within that plan, and in essence, while a lot of those areas will potentially need to be looked at, there were other areas which may come on board now because of COVID, process changes, etc. just as to give you a flavour of the issues which we had identified we were planning to look at, we were going to focus on information governance and the IT side to look at how we actually got in place processes for GDPR. Financial governance was going to be more work around the budgets. In terms of corporate governance, last year we did a big review of human resources, and obviously we gave a poor assessment of that one. One of the things we picked up on was looking at performance management. Now, while we focus on performance management across the business in terms of the outputs, we hadn't looked at employees. Now, that's due to be looked at potentially in September when there's the new performance management arrangements for staff in place. Trading companies we'd identified to do a high-level review of the governance, and obviously that's been discussed earlier in the meeting as well. One of the issues which we did send an email around to members for their views on areas which could be covered related to appointments. And so we were proposing to look at proposals and the processes for appointing people to the boards and the committees sponsored by the combined authority. As we have the business boards, we provide the audit service for those. We were going to propose to look at the local industry strategy, and as well as priority sector strategies, for example, relating to their agri-tech, their digital and ICT, advanced materials and manufacturing. So that was a focus on a separate area of the business. With the new committee structures, we were going to focus on some of the aspects of transport. So we're going to look at the local transport plan, bus reform, and there are various grant certification arrangements. In terms of housing, we're going to look at some aspects of the affordable housing schemes, which are in operation. And similarly on the skill side, there will be additional works for the adult education budget, the University of Peterborough project, and a review of the delivery of apprenticeships. There are other grants which are outside of those which we'd also look at. As we have actually set aside 30 days as well, and that really links in with the last point of in relation to the audit plan. There are a lot of things which are going on and the organisation changing, etc., post-COVID. So what we've done, we've actually put in a number of audit days to actually focus on risks as they change. So we'd look to try and put those in place. Also, as was mentioned at the previous meeting, the request was put in place. What happens if members identify something and they want to get that immediate, can the audit do something about it? And we refer to that in 4.3 of the report. We put some time set aside in there for new works, and in terms of those, the process would be that myself and John Alsop, in conjunction with the chair, would discuss those changes and then we would factor those in. Obviously, it's already been mentioned earlier in the meeting that Peterborough provide the service at present, and the service level agreement for other services finish at the end of March. So obviously we're looking to deliver this, although obviously we are outside of that SLA at the present moment in time. I'm happy to take questions from any members in relation to the plan or the progress made.
Thank you very much, Steve. Anybody? David Brown. David Brown and then Matt Maguire.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to 3.2, and for the sake of accuracy, I assume that the first bullet point is actually East Cambridgeshire's trading company, and that there isn't one in East Cambridge.
That is true, yes, correct.
Mark?
I'd come in there then. Well, Steve didn't go on to paragraph 4.4, but it just raises an interesting point for me. He mentions that internal audit will take the opportunity to adopt many of the practices, blah, blah, blah. I'm impressed by this. I hope it'll roll out to more than just internal audit, because I noticed the reference to remote working, video conferencing in particular, because this is something I've been harping on about for years within Cambridgeshire County Council and other authorities, that we don't take advantage often of video conferences. I mean, I myself might end up having to expected to go down to Cambridge for a 20-minute briefing or something. So I hope we will take greater advantage of this, and I hope Kim and other people will take this on board as well. But this really needs to be, we need to benefit from this shutdown in some ways, this lockdown in some ways, and video conferencing to me is something that should be used where we don't need formal meetings, where certainly for us members, certainly not public meetings. So I was just impressed by that paragraph. I'd like to see more of it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mac. Any other comments? Nick?
Yeah, you actually mentioned the possibility of auditing the combined authorities' internal appointments process, i.e. how people are appointed to various boards and committees. I'm probably fairly well up on, you know, constitutional things, and I'm not entirely clear on how the process operates. I think it sort of implies to me there might be a bit of a lack of transparency, so I would welcome you sort of auditing that, really.
Thank you. Tony Mason. Tony?
Hi there. Earlier on today in the update from John, there was a lot of reference to a focus on issuance of grants for business support and business development during this COVID crisis, and leaving out the support required to hopefully support business as we come out of COVID and deliver an economic benefit to the region. Now, there was a mentioning in the outline for 2021 around grants. Has some reference been made to that change of focus in the past few months into the potential internal audit timeframe and requirements?
That's a very, very good point made in relation to grants, and what I do make the reference that post-COVID, there'll be, you know, the focus of the audit plans will be a lot different. So in terms of grants, that is certainly one area which is already on the list of what to look at.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Steve, for the paper and where you've got to on this year that's gone, and the thoughts you've contributed to what the plan for the next year will be, and the way of making it more flexible as events change. I think there are a number of items that you mentioned that were on your list for potential things to look at next year, particularly the appointments process for external appointees, which would be welcome. And the comments about using video conferencing and remote working where it makes sense after COVID, I think found a welcome amongst members. So we look forward to, at the end of July, two things. One from your good self, which will be your final report of that, an audit opinion of the 1920 year. And there will be a separate paper which we will receive from officers on the thinking on the combined authority about taking internal audit forward into 2021. And in that process, we mustn't lose the research and thinking that you've done regarding the future plans. Is anybody else, is that a satisfactory summing up? Please nod. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can now move on to the report of our work. Last year, the report we produced, I was asked to present at the Combined Authority Board, and I made the point that it's pretty dry reading, the sort of stuff that we do. It's the it's making sure the hygiene factors are working. So it's not of excitement. I've tried this year to tighten up some of the language and make it more readable, and through the introduction, focus on some of the issues that came up in the year. But I would be grateful for comments, feedback. Is there stuff in there that shouldn't be there, or vice versa, or whether you think it's ready to be put forward. And I should also share that there will be, I discussed the way we do these reports with my counterpart in overview and scrutiny, and they this year for the first time have put on record as an annual report for the board their activities, and both these reports are due to go to the combined authority on the 24th of June, if I've got my date right.
Sorry, if I could just quickly just correct that. Sorry that reference to the 24th of June has crept in. That 24th of June meeting is a special a meeting for a single item, which is likely to take up the entirety of the business, but it will follow on to the next meeting of the Combined Authority Board, which is scheduled for 3rd August.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I remembered the 24th of June because it's my 48th wedding anniversary. That's why it stuck in my mind.
Congratulations in advance.
So, have people got comments or feedback or stuff that would help make the report more valuable, or do we think it documents our work for the last year adequately?
Chairman, can I just say thank you for the report? It makes good reading. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll take that as a nod through then, and it will go to the combined authority, as we mentioned. There were two downsides, I think, in the year. It hasn't been helped by the changeover of officers, but that's settling down. Nick Sanford, you wanted to say something? No?
Yes, sorry. No, that's sorry. I was just having some difficulty. I'm trying to manipulate two computers here. Just on paragraph 4.3 of the report, it actually mentions the fact that this committee has a quorum threshold of 2/3 of its attendance, and I think there was at least one meeting during the year where that was almost a problem, and the meeting was almost incorrect. Is that something under our control, or is that something that's imposed on us by other people?
I'd look for advice, but my understanding is this is immutable.
That's correct, Chair. Yeah.
Sorry, my microphone.
Yep, so if I can assist on that point, that's set out in the Combined Authority Constitution, and it applies to all committees. So yeah, I'd treat that as immutable.
Matt?
Yeah, Chairman, just to say in addition to that, you did in fact write to all local authorities trying to emphasise the importance of us making sure we met the quorum. Hopefully we won't have so many problems in the future.
Okay. Any other comments? Right. Well, thank you for giving me your. No, hang on. David Brown.
Thanks, Chairman. Just before you do present it to the board, could somebody go through and check the spelling? So, for example, the heading for number 5 doesn't read governance; it reads governance.
Thank you. I'm beginning to welcome your eagle eye. That will be done. So, right, yes, thank you again for giving support to the report. Now we'll move on. The Corporate Risk Register, which Robert Parkin will introduce.
I will. Thank you very much, Chair. Can I check, Sue, that we have Francesca with us? And if not, could we just pause while she joins?
She should be on your screen now.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so Francesca will assist on this, Chair. So this is a report which brings before you the Corporate Risk Register. We have two recommendations here. One is to review it, and the second one is to recommend any proposed changes. It's quite a detailed document. We can go through it in a moment. Corporate risk register is reviewed by the corporate management team, which highlights risks and considers the level of risk and steps to mitigate. And clearly, it's a live document. I understand coming into this work area for the combined authority that there's been quite a substantial amount of work put in very recently, and in particular, Francesca has put in some detailed work. And if I can, before we turn to the detail of the register itself, I'd just like to invite Francesca so she can quickly summarise the sorts of activities that have been put in around the risk register, and in particular the methodology of considering what risk profile and what steps should attach to each item. Francesca, are you happy to add some comments here?
Yeah, I'm happy to add some comments. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, councillors. As you're aware, the audit, the risk management strategy went to audit and governance in December, and then was later approved at the Combined Authority Board in January. Since then, we've been working with the risk management strategy in terms of making sure that risk is an ever-evolving and ever-checking process. So we've embedded that within our projects, our programs, our directorates, and also at the corporate level. The corporate risk register is reviewed with the CMT members, and obviously in light of the recent incident with the pandemic with COVID, we've obviously added 2 additional lines on the risk register relating to that. This is something that we're taking very importantly at the Combined Authority, and we're working with everybody involved to make sure that this risk register is also up to date, but also that everything in terms of the risk process is managed correctly.
Chair, I'm happy to jump back in. Thank you very much, Francesca. We may need to reintroduce you just to talk about specific items. Chair, the risk register itself has been made available to the committee for a look over. I wasn't proposing to go through line by line for a discussion on each item. I'm happy to field any questions on each one in particular, but also if there is a question about the approach to appraising risk and its onward management, again, very keen to hear from yourself, Chair, and members of the committee.
Maguire, you had a point? Mac first, then Nick.
Yeah, despite being an advocate of video conferencing, the only problem I'm going to say, Chairman, is it's almost impossible to read the actual risk register on my screen. I know I can zoom in and out of it, but it makes it very difficult. So all I can say is, whilst I appreciate they have to put it in that format, not so easy on the screen. Just a comment, Chairman, but I'm happy. So I'm not like, I hope Robert wouldn't want to go through line by line, because I just couldn't follow it. So.
It certainly take that point, and I think working with spreadsheets does present a particular challenge with the interface. It is something that we will think about. In terms of conducting this discussion, I'm happy to try and project up the screen that I'm seeing, if that would help. I think we might have it, but otherwise, I'm working with a reduced size Zoom screen and looking at the document. Whatever would help, but again, sorry, back to yourself, Chair.
Nick Sanford.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't actually at the December meeting when this was last considered, but I can recall we considered it at a previous meeting, and I can remember suggesting that maybe the corporate risk register should include some reference to climate change, because I'm aware that other organisations have included that. Has that been thought about? Because it doesn't actually seem to appear in here.
Happy to try and assist on that one. I'm not sure what has been presented through to CMT, but as with any emergent risk and matter of concern, and certainly following this discussion, I'm certainly happy to push that item forward and speak with the relevant director so that it can be assessed and considered for the purposes of this document.
Just to add to that, Chair, it was added, there was a discussion at the December committee regarding climate change that Dermot raised. I think it was actually agreed that we weren't going to add it onto the corporate risk register at that moment in time due to the Climate Change Commission coming through. And I think it was due to be reviewed and then looked potentially added onto the risk register later. But I think at that meeting on December, it was decided not to be added at that time.
Thank you, Francesca, for that.
Thanks for that corporate history. I do think that, though, that even if it's scored at a low level, I would encourage thinking to have it such an item on the register, because things like the Climate Commission are then actions that are visible, which are about facing up to whatever climate change means. Sorry, now who was next? That was Mike Davey, and then David, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, two points, Chair. Firstly, I was also going to make the point Councillor Sanford made about climate change, and I think it needs some detail as well about which elements of the programme that the combined authority is introducing will require most attention. Clearly issues around transport, but also house building. I think as I say, I think further attention on climate change and implications would be welcome. The second point I had was around the gateway review. Is that not the most significant risk? Because obviously, I'm not saying I want it to happen, but clearly, if there are problems that relate to the gateway review, then that has a huge implication for the whole of the programme. And it's just about how that fits in and whether or not, again, that requires more detail about the implications for the gateway review, even if there are any questions whatsoever, or alternatively if there's not. But I just wonder if greater detail might be required rather than just the one line at the moment. And my final comment is that I do appreciate around COVID-19, it's very difficult at this stage and it's moving all the time. But again, perhaps within the next month or so, some further detail about what the implications are for the authority and how those might be mitigated, particularly in relationship to how we, as a combined authority, work with other authorities and bodies across the county. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Any response to those comments from officers?
I'm happy to come in general terms. In terms of the currency of the document, I'll be working closely with the chief executives and CMT to review this on an ongoing basis with them to offer support, and I'll certainly look to incorporate these points for discussion.
Thank you. David Brown?
Thank you, Chairman. It's just one that I'm aware of from reports elsewhere in the country. Just to flag it really, with expanding grant schemes, etc., in response to COVID, there is a risk of in some cases fraud, but in other cases just mistakes being made of money being paid to the wrong people, and just really to make sure senior officers are aware that's happening and we've got controls in place.
Thank you. Any other comments before if I could just say that I thought when I looked at the zoomed up or expanded the view of the risk register itself, I was a bit taken aback because 75% of the risks are red. There are no green rated risks, and that is an indication of the way that the pressure that's on the organisation and its ability to deal with these risks didn't come across as comforting. And I'd also and when I asked Robert Parkin, well, who's in charge in the sense of the whole thing, admittedly Robert's new with us, but it wasn't clear in his mind. But it seems to me that it's not in a sustainable position if this is true, that 75% of the items on the risk register are red, because if I remember, the policies will say that a red item requires urgent management action to resolve or ameliorate it. And if I misunderstood that, then it didn't come across.
So in terms of the ownership of the risk register, as discussed, Chair, that's for CMT with myself in assistance, and that will be certainly an active piece that I'll be taking forward. The ratings, yes, I certainly expect that working together with CMT that we would look to see those ratings coming back into amber and green in due course. Without a background specifically in the document and these items, I'm unable to comment exactly on each one in sufficient detail really to say why they're at that status. But I think in my mind, being responsible around risk, particularly lawfulness, it's yes, it's certainly always a challenge to see reds, but it's in some ways good to see reds so that one is alive and alert to the need to intervene. But certainly there'll be committed work going into to get mitigation obviously in place as an audit has been. But those I'd expect those reds to start to come into amber and green in due course.
Kim, you wanted to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly to comment on that. I think at the time that we put the risk register together, obviously we were in the height of COVID, and I think there was could have been at that time a consideration that a lot of these risks might be impacted by COVID. I think, as Robert has said, we are taking a very active role in looking at the risk register through CMT, and we hope that in due course we will see these reds come down quite quickly. I think now that we're getting more of a sense of where we are in relation to the impact of this on our general business.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll try and sum up. What we're asked to do is to review and to recommend any proposed changes to go on to the combined authority. I think in the recommendation section, we are recommending the wish to see a risk relating to climate change to be included. I think in giving comment, we've expressed our concern about the fact that 75% of the risks are red, and we welcome the advice that these should be moderated. And thirdly, we'd like to see it again at the 31st of July board, so that we can get an insight as committee, so we can see how that has been managed. I think also I'd like to add, because we've lost a bit with the changeover of personalities, I'd like to revert back, please, that future papers do draw our attention to the top 3 or 4 risks in the organisation, and remind us which ones have got more, the risk has increased or decreased. Again, the significant ones, because we can't really see from this the dynamics of how the risks are altering for the organisation. And lastly, Robert, if you're able to find a way of presenting this which is legible, you will have done what all your predecessors have tried and failed. Maybe there needs to be I tried to read it across the screen. You just can't do it. And I can understand why at the management level you need all of that detail, and it could only work that way. But at the director type level, and I put us in that mode, we need some sort of halfway house which is manageable bureaucratically, but actually summarises them. There are only 17 risks, 18 when we've added climate change. Some way of maybe not forcing us to go to an A3 sheet with a magnifying glass, but finds a way of distilling in some sort of register director level type information, but without making life bureaucratically unnecessary. And I've got Matt Maguire now wants to wave his hand.
Yeah, can I just come in on that point, Chairman? I mean, I'm making the assumption, I think we all would, even for the July meeting, we'll be probably into a virtual meeting. And I for one, am happy to have agenda papers sent to me electronically. But given that the you really do need an A3 sheet. Is it not beyond the wit of our officers to be able to say they could send out just the A3 sheet by snail mail? I certainly find it very difficult. Maybe that's an age problem, but trying to view that on the screen is very, very difficult. Even if I zoom in, I can't see the whole. I can't scan the whole item. So you know, just sending that out by snail mail would help us. There's not too many members.
Chair, we'll certainly, if I could just quickly respond, we'll certainly take away the action to examine this, including the possibility of sending hard copies. I actually think that we could probably make considerable headway into legibility or comprehensibility by stepping down the document into various report form elements. So we're seeing the, as it were, the base document there, and that's you know, there's a great spread to that. But actually, when we start to want to interrogate and draw out certain points, we could probably have an easier presentational style. So we'll take that away.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. And I think the members will welcome that, and we look forward to finding a better solution for the 31st of July. Any other points on this item before we move on? No, thank you. Looking right, now we're going to bring forward 2 items up the agenda so that we're not totally worn out by the time we got to discuss them. And the first one is the urgent Lancaster Way item, which is item 16. And I'm not sure whether Robert Parkett or Kim are going to introduce it.
I'm happy to start it off, and Kim, I'm sure will step in to assist as we go through. So Chair, so firstly, very grateful to you for taking this item and bringing it to today's committee as an agenda item. It follows, Chair and members of the committee, from a meeting of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee on the 15th of May, and an item was brought to that meeting, a special meeting, to consider projects relating to Lancaster Way, and in particular requests in relation to additional project funding. That committee resolved among various things in approving the additional funding to seek that there was a reference to this audit committee for a review in terms of the project and the timetable and the costs, and that request has been developed into some terms of reference which have been jointly drawn up with between colleagues at county and within CPCA, which are essentially looking to understand the project, to understand where there may have been pressures in the system, and no doubt to report back with lessons learned to assist in future projects, future working relationships. There will be an approval of an external reviewer auditor. It was felt very important to demonstrate independence in what's clearly an important piece of work. And so the report is inviting the committee to request the Chief Finance Officer, in consultation with yourself, Chair, as well as the CPCA's Director of Delivery and Strategy, and also to consult with Cambridgeshire County Council on the agreed identity of an independent external auditor with capability and appropriate expertise in this field. Chair and members, the terms of reference are set out for you and repeated in the document at Appendix A. And as I say, some work and effort has gone in between colleagues, CPCA colleagues and CCC colleagues, to develop these to an agreed standard. There is, in terms of timetable, if I can just skip onto that element of the terms of reference, we obviously have the timetabled meeting of the 31st of July. I think it may actually be a preference from colleagues at the County Council to see this coming back a little earlier to this committee. I think if all I would say is, in terms of that, obviously we'll need to have a think about whether that's agreed, is just, I think, an understanding of the extent of the work. The 31st of July feels quite a way away for certain purposes. Clearly, the appointments and contracting of an auditor takes a little bit of time, getting them to read into a project a little more and to carry out a comprehensive piece of work will, of course, take its own time. And of course, in terms of getting the appropriate papers to this committee to assist it in the future meeting to consider the outcomes, certainly thinking back to contents of today's session, and as we all know, we want to give you a timely sight of that, so that may influence your thoughts as to that timetable. I hope that's been helpful in terms of what you're being asked to do today. I'm happy to try to assist with questions, Chair, but yeah, that's everything for now from me.
Are you want to say anything before I ask for comments?
Yes, I think just in relation to that second point, Chair, I've had some discussions with the county, and as Robert has already said, they are keen that this matter has quite a speedy resolution. So they are asking whether the audit committee would consider an earlier, perhaps extraordinary meeting as soon as the audit report is ready to report back to this committee. And therefore, we don't necessarily want to fix on the 31st of July, unless that is the preference of the committee. But it's to give an indication about whether you would be willing to consider an early extraordinary meeting to have this resolved as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I think that goes back to the remote working point from Mac. I think so. We've been asked, are we minded that we'll, apart from any questions about what's proposed, are we minded to have an ad hoc extraordinary meeting remotely as soon as there's some indication of a date, and we just need 6 of us? Mac.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I'm content personally for us to have an emergency meeting, virtual meeting, whatever it is. My only concern, and I should say, I understand why this item would need to be urgent and people are looking for a July resolution to it, but it does seem to, on the face of it, that there might be quite a lot of work in this for members. So we would need to have all the background information well in advance of any meeting that we're going to have to discuss it. And I'm not just sure of the practicalities of that. How is it being proposed that we will actually carry out a proper review? Can I just cover a bit of an explanation on that? I'm not sure it's got it.
Robert, could you respond to that before I ask Nick Sanford to comment?
Yeah, so well, the challenge is upon ourselves as officers and as an external auditor to make sure that this committee was fully equipped with a comprehensive presentation, and that the report was readied and complete. Obviously, it's a public committee, so that session of understanding is going to take place in a public setting. It will certainly take the task away to ensure that there's a full presentation and a detailed report, and to think about and ensuring, and to ensure that there's a timely presentation to yourselves. Clearly, slightly unknown at the moment as to the course it would take. There's a desire in terms of the timing, and the extent of the work, and I think it is important to allow the auditors to do their independent work, obviously. But it may be that, insofar as Chair and Committee are minded to assist by being flexible as to that return date, that it could be, as it were, held under review. So to either return by the 31st or such earlier date as the Chair is satisfied, is appropriate, given the report.
Okay, thank you. Nick, do you want to say something still?
Yeah, I think it might be a good idea to have an extraordinary meeting, particularly if there is some degree of urgency. But I just endorse the point about it would be beneficial to have some more background information, because I'm not familiar with this particular location, and I'm also not familiar with the sort of arguments in favour of this scheme. There's in one of the reports there's a section head of the value for money, but it's only actually got 2 really short paragraphs in it, so a bit more background information would be helpful.
Certainly. Sorry, did you want me to? I was happy to jump in or not there, Chair, if it would assist. I think it's obviously
just wait a second, Robin.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things I want to be quite clear on, really. One, I mean, because unlike Councillor Sanford, I do know this place, and it's work that's been crying out to be done for years and years and years. And I hope this isn't going to put in some artificial delay into getting on the ground and getting this stuff done, because East Cambridgeshire definitely needs it, and so does Fenland, with links coming down from March, Chatteris, etc. It's the whole bit about okay, we're going for an independent external auditor. Does this do we as a committee have our own budget that we're going to pay for this out of? Does it come out of the Transport Committee's budget? What are the likely costs? And okay, we do want it done as soon as we can, but I'm a bit concerned about saying to an external expert in this area, you've got to have it done by X, because to me that's just going to inflate the costs. And to me it's more important we get, if you like, value for money out of the review as much as we get value for money out of the work on Lancaster Way.
Thank you, David. Before I ask Robert Parkin, Mike Davey.
Yeah, very briefly, Chair. I don't doubt the need for the work. If I know the roundabout, I think the question for me is the issue why this roundabout as opposed to other roundabouts. So it's the process of the decision making that is presumably the key here for us as an audit committee, not whether the work's value or not. It's whether or not how this compares to, I don't know, roundabouts that could have had the priority in 101 places across the county. Thank
you. Robert Parkin, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll certainly try to, and it may be that Kim wants to chip in. So I think in terms of the value for money piece of the exercise, it'll be for the Chief Finance Officer to, having looked at, obviously working with the Chair and colleagues at CPCA and CCC, will look at possibles. And having a mind to his duty for value for money, will consider an appoint, and he'll be allocating budget to that. And I understand it's to be met by CPCA, but Kim will correct me if I'm wrong on that. In terms of the sort of ambit of the review and I think anything to do with its journey to here, I'd certainly want to avoid using this session to talk about, as it were, the background of the project and the merits and demerits, etc. That for me is something that's going to be held within the independent work of the auditor, and that's what that's about. As to looking, whether this is a merits-based review of relative schemes, my understanding is that isn't the case. It's actually it's a look specifically at this scheme. As it were, but please do be referred to the text of that terms of reference, which I think gives I would hope clear definition of the scope of this, and that this is a review. This isn't, as it were, of processes, etc., and governance and the items there, the value for money bit, and that's what's taking place. And if Kim wants to add anything else to that.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to Councillor Brown's point, I think we're not expecting this to cause any delay at all to the works at the roundabout. That review by its very nature is looking backwards, so it's looking retrospectively at how we've got to this point, rather than actually seeking to challenge the decision that was made. So the commitment has been made to fund the roundabout. The work can start. That was the whole purpose of the extraordinary committee of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, was to ensure that we could provide that funding assurance so that the works could begin. We are, of course, just looking at now how we got to that position where we needed an extraordinary committee, I think, and that's the purpose of the review. There are some concerns expressed by county about the presentation of the report into the committee, and equally, I think, some concerns on our side about impact on our budget from holding matters unplanned for. So I think that's the purpose of the review. It's a look back at some of the issues to see what lessons we can learn and how we can work together as good partners in the future to ensure that we properly plan for all these appropriate highways works. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, was struggling to unmute. Thank you for that, Kim. Totally support what you just said, and yes, we need to get on with it, particularly learning those lessons for future.
Could I just ask for a couple of bits of clarification? Looking at the terms of reference, it starts off with examine the affordability and overall cost of the scheme. Now, I read that in the present tense originally, meaning was it affordable to continue to do it? But what you're saying, this is whether the judgments on affordability at the time are correct. Is that, Kim, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I think that we don't want any delay, so it's not a look at whether we restart any sort of procurement around the scheme. It's about whether the processes we have engaged up to this date provide us value for money in taking these types of scheme forward. We're using this one, Lancaster Way scheme, as a look, hopefully lessons learned for us as a combined authority and how we deal with these issues going forward.
Thank you. And the other point I noted somewhere, though I couldn't find it at this minute, was some statement that this cost overrun has difficult impacts on budgets elsewhere on the projects for the combined authority. Is that true? And if so, what sort of magnitude are we talking about?
Yes, I think this is about how we deal with matters where we have, I mean, specifically we are looking at the Lancaster Way, and specifically it's around the difference between costs presented on one day and then very shortly afterwards an increase in costs, and the impact that has overall on our budget as a combined authority. If we are continually dealing, or not continually, but if we are having to deal with projects where there is unexpected cost increase, that's bound to have an impact on budget. It ends up driving the budget decisions that are being made, and that is causing a concern for us. So we want to look at how we can try and avoid that going forward, to ensure that there is a planned process for budgeting around these schemes, rather than having unexpected costs face, which does then have an impact on how we budget, and we have to have more of a responsive budget rather than a proactive budget. That's the concern.
Are there any other comments? So we respond positively to the request to this review, in the knowledge that it's backward looking, doesn't affect the delivery of the project as such, but it is about lessons learned for managing such projects as the combined authority goes forward. That we are we're open to an extraordinary meeting, virtual extraordinary meeting, should the timings allow that, but on the proviso, both for the extraordinary meeting or if it was at a normal meeting, that we get sufficient time to consider the papers and findings of the auditor. Is there anything else we ought to make sure in minutes, or are we happy with that? Okay, we're happy with that. Now, the other item I wanted to move up, which I mentioned at the beginning, is item 13, which is trading companies. Is Rochelle going to join us, Robert,
She is,
or
yeah. I understand that Sue should be admitting her just now to the meeting.
Oh yes, I can see her name. Okay. Now the remit on us is to note the content, but when I read it, I thought there were the interesting way that these company arrangements are set up. It was new in the sense that this committee has not seen such a model before, and I thought we should have ample time, or if needed, to be able to understand some of the principles that rely about the arrangement as well as the arrangement itself. And so I don't know, Robert, are you going to introduce it, or is Rochelle?
Rochelle's kindly agreed to introduce, and I'd certainly obviously support that this is presented as an update, but we'll certainly take any comments away, and if you wish to task us to come back in to a future meeting with any more detailed points, we'll certainly do that. So within those terms, I'm happy to pass you over to Rochelle if you're...
Morning, Rochelle, and thank you very much for joining us, and we're all ears.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Good morning, officers. So the purpose of this report today is to provide an overview of the combined authority trading companies and give some detail about scrutiny arrangements. So you note that the recommendation is to note the content of this report. So moving to section 2, this summarises the background for the incorporation of the companies. In September of 2018, the combined authority approved the housing strategy. Now, it was the housing strategy that recommended the establishment of the wholly owned company to enable direct intervention in the housing market. In March of 2019, the combined authority agreed to establish the trading company and also the housing development company, with the trading company acting as the holding company for the housing development company. In July of 2019, the board agreed the statutory documents for the two companies, and they also agreed the shareholder agreement. Now, we'll just give a little bit of information about the shareholder agreement. It regulates the relationship between the combined authority and the companies, but it also includes matters which are reserved for the combined authority, by which the combined authority has to consent to before the company takes any action. So to give an example, if any of the companies wish to vary the articles of association or issue share capital or adopt or amend the business plans for either of the company, those matters have to go back to the combined authority for combined authority assent. This is helpful in terms of making sure that the governance arrangements reflect the decisions that are made by the combined authority board, and also in terms of the scrutiny arrangements. Any such reserved matters would be on the forward plan, and then the scrutiny committee could review or scrutinise any of those decisions. Paragraphs 2.5 and 2.6 set out the incorporation details for the company. So turning to Angle Holdings first, this is a company limited by shares, and the combined authority is the only shareholder. So the paragraph also sets out who the company directors are and who the company secretary is. You have details of the independent chairman, that's Brian Stewart. Brian was selected for Angles Holding Limited purely because of his skills and expertise in the housing development industry. Likewise, he also sits on the board of directors for Angle Developments East, which was also incorporated in September. And it's a company limited by shares also, but the shareholder on this occasion is Angle Holdings. So if you think about a triangle, you've got the combined authority at the top, you have Angle Developments in the middle, Angle Holdings in the middle, and Angle Developments stemming off. And the plan is that any other subsidiaries would sit on the same level as Angle Developments. So in terms of day-to-day governance, that is managed by the board of directors for the respective companies. We're currently working on processes for dealing with conflicts of interest, ensuring transparent decision making, compliance with the Articles of Association, and compliance with the shareholder agreement. Now, the Companies Act requires that annual accounts are audited. However, there's been no company activity since incorporation, so there's no immediate need for appointment of external auditors. And then lastly, just to ensure that directors are aware of their legal duties, training will be arranged for directors on their directors' duties as well. So that concludes the report, and I'll take any questions or comment if that's okay with you, Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. I saw Maguire. Did you want to say something?
Yes, please, Chairman. Chairman, I don't know if I'm missing something, but this, although we've just been asked to note this item, it seems to be an overview and scrutiny report. Why are we looking at it rather than overview and scrutiny?
Sorry, Chair, if I could just intervene. I'd assumed that, and it may be the wrong emphasis, in which case I apologise, but I'd assume that it would be of keen interest to understand the scrutiny arrangements applied to the company. So it carries a bit of that emphasis, which may look a little bit a little bit odd to this committee. So sorry that it looks that way. I think it's important to hear obviously any comments that you have rather than simply to note, and we are on hand to continue to sort of fill out an understanding of the picture of the companies and indeed to report back. But if that overemphasis on the scrutiny role has overplayed its hand, then I'll take responsibility for that.
Could I just come back there, Chairman? Thank you for that, Robert. But has it been to overview and scrutiny? Is it the intention to take it to overview and scrutiny? I mean, it's fine for us to note it and make comment on it and be updated on these holding companies, but I'm just not sure what's really expected of us or hoped from us.
Happy to come back in. It's really it's any comments, but also I think to give you a picture of an area and aspect of the CPCA's business, which may touch upon your work. But yes, it certainly does. This is an item that goes to overview and scrutiny.
And just to add, sorry, Chairman.
No, Michelle, go on.
Thank you. Just to add that the paper has been to overview and scrutiny as well, and it was helpful for them to understand their role in scrutinising the activities of the company. So equally, it's also important for the Audit and Governance Committee to understand the dynamic and the relationship between the overview and scrutiny function for the companies, as well as the broader role of the combined authority.
Thank you. David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, presumably next year we will be expected to look at the accounts for the company. Therefore, to me, I can fully understand where Councillor Maguire is coming from, but to me it's quite nice to be in, if you like, from day one, so when we are looking at the accounts, we know what our respective roles are with overview and scrutiny.
Thank you. Mike Davey.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point about like Mac and David. So therefore, my question is about this committee. Presumably, it's about establishing why Brian Stewart was chosen, and was there a process around Brian? Because that presumably is the governance issue here, because we have a committee that's a subsidiary of the combined authority, which works into the housing committee, presumably, of the combined authority. So it's presumably the membership of these companies that we're expected to question. Would that be Robert? I'm looking for guidance, I think, Robert.
Sorry, very happy to. Yeah, so the yes, absolutely. The role of audit and governance is as it were I think the overall framework for being satisfied that governance and expenditure is appropriate. There are a host of technical obligations that sit around companies, not in detailed terms, as well as the sort of general general confidence that is very important for this committee and the CPCA in the arrangements that are in place. So this is a foregrounding document and an update, and there'll certainly be, as it were, this will certainly fall into the assurance activity that this committee's called on to look at, and there'll be more detail coming back into future meetings.
Rob, I'm happy to answer the question around the appointment, if that would be helpful, Councillor Davey.
I think that's exactly where I'm coming to, Rochelle, is to how was Brian, I'm sure Brian's great, but how was he chosen? What was the process? And does it fit within our audit requirements? Thank you, Rochelle.
That's absolutely fine. So the shareholder agreement, as I mentioned, the reserved matters. One of the reserved matters is appointment of directors. So actually that decision went to the Combined Authority Board. Brian underwent a robust recruitment process and was selected because of his skills and expertise. In fact, I believe that we could probably circulate his CV to the committee if that would be helpful, but I can assure you it was a robust, fair recruitment process, and the decision was approved by the Combined Authority Board. I believe it may have been in September of last year.
Michelle, on that last point, and I understand exactly what Councillor Davies is questioning. I think when we have future papers of this type, understanding those issues, that there was an open and transparent recruitment process, it isn't for us to take a view on who was the qualities of who was chosen or not. That's a decision-making matter. But it is for us to understand the governance and that it met the principles, because I think I particularly see in Angle Holdings and Angle Developments Limited, I said in the pre-brief, this reminded me of, oh, what a lovely war, because one staff officer jumps over the next staff officer's back because all the same names are in all the levels-ish. And so whilst these are companies, it looks as if there's just the Combined Authority with a different label. And I think from a governance point of view, one needs to understand, is this company law and the law of the company land, which these companies are responsible to, or are they actually a proxy for the Combined Authority with all the public sector controls that we have? And that didn't, to my mind, that didn't really come out, and I haven't heard yet any reason why we're doing this, because it's all the same people. What is the reason for having a company? And I probably can work out the reason, but you couldn't tell from the paper. That's what I meant. So I support some of the comments colleagues have made. And Tony Mason, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think I'm probably of a similar mind to other councillors here. I'm looking at this and thinking, I can understand why companies are being formed. You want to limit the risks to the CPCA and have separate companies. But what impact does that have on the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee in monitoring the setup of these companies? What are the articles of association of these companies? Is it appropriate for the chair to also be the company secretary, which would be against some corporate governance requirements in the private sector as opposed to the public sector? So I begin to read this and get nervous that I can understand the principles behind it, but how it's being executed, and that we're being asked to approve an overview of something that actually, are we being neutered in some way?
Sorry, Nick Sanford before Rochelle or Robert reply to that.
Yeah, I've got a similar concern really. I think I would have, the thing that seems to be missing from the report is an explanation of why these functions need to be handed over to private companies, why the Combined Authority couldn't exert those responsibilities themselves. And I think the concern it brings into my mind is that this is you've already got it's in terms of accountability, because you've already got a situation where the Combined Authority is one stage removed from the public, in the sense that it's got representatives from local authorities. This is taking it one stage further. So I can see there's a degree of accountability through the Scrutiny Committee, but I'm just wondering how, if you had an average member of the public who was concerned about the activities of one of these companies, how would they be able to feed through those concerns?
Thank you. Rochelle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. So it would be useful just to give a sort of a very broad brush touch to the legal regime. Now, the activities of the company broadly come under trading. Now, we don't actually have, as a local authority, the power to trade, but we can trade for a company. So hence the private companies for the delivery of the housing strategy. That moves on nicely to the second point, that I think the background knowledge for why we're doing what we're doing is contained in the housing strategy, and I think it would be helpful for that information to be relayed to the committee in some way, shape or form to give that overview background. In terms of the activities of the company and any concerns that members of the public may have, everything we do is subject to freedom of information because we are a local authority company, and we're in the process of putting all our company information, including board minutes, our publication statement, on a separate part of the Combined Authority website, so that information is available in the public domain. There was a point made about the chair of the company being the company secretary. That's not actually the case. So the chairman is the independent person, Mr. Stewart, Brian Stewart, and also the company secretary is the monitoring officer. So there is a separation of powers there.
Apologies, I misread the name. I apologise.
Kim, do you have light to share? Having listened to what our questions were and Rochelle's explanations.
Yeah, I think Rochelle has explained it very well, that the purpose of the company was rooted in the housing strategy, which was unanimously agreed by the members. Its purpose is to provide interventions in the housing market if they are necessary. So you will see that whilst there hasn't been a great deal of trading, there was some funding agreed for the housing company to intervene in relation to 3 areas and 3 housing sites. The board of the company met, and by the time the board of the company met, it wasn't necessary to intervene in those sites any further. Then in fact market forces had overtaken us and decided to deliver out the schemes, and so those matters were put on hold. And it shows that whilst there is no active trading, the board is meeting to discuss its purpose, what it's there to do, what it's trying to achieve, and I think exercising a good use of a good understanding of its purpose and in relation to the use of public funds, you know, how it is intending to use those public funds. And as Rochelle said, whilst this may be to make a profit, there is also a social element to what we do, in that you know, we will intervene in the housing market where market is unable to bring certain things forward, or if we want to deliver some of our wider objectives like 100k homes, etc. And there was a business plan which was approved by the board earlier this year, and this was a revision to our earlier business plan around housing strategy. The purpose of the trading company, which sits above it, is to provide a sort of overarching view of any companies that may develop. You may have seen that we have got an emerging growth service coming forward, so this has been reported to board throughout its development. Its purpose is to provide a service to businesses who are and to provide them with support and assistance to grow the business. So there are a very large number of businesses in our area that are on the brink of being able to grow but don't have quite the necessary skills or support to do that, and we're setting up a growth service to enable that. But that does require an ability to trade, and it also means that we can use some of our capital investment and invest that into the company in order to generate a revenue, so it makes our money go further, as it were. So there are purposes behind these. There is, I think, you've made a lot of good points about the report. I think it doesn't necessarily address why we set up the trading company, how it's controlled, what the relevance is of the audit committee to these various trading companies, and why you need to know about them. And yes, Councillor Sanford, you're correct. What if a member of the public does have a concern? How do they notify that, and how does that get dealt with through the governance processes that you have? Because we may be setting up companies, they are wholly owned by the Combined Authority, which means the Combined Authority is the shareholder, and it is the shareholder that has the ultimate say in what and how the company delivers. So I think if probably we can build on some of the questions you've asked today and perhaps bring back a report which gives you a wider overview. But like our draft statement of accounts, this is really about education at this stage. There aren't really any risks being flagged around this because we're not really trading at this stage. But it's important for you to have that background knowledge because you might see it in the accounts going forward. There may be risks flagged with you about the trading companies, and it's important that you have an understanding, therefore, of how the governance of the organisation works. So I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Yeah, it's very helpful, Kim. I mean, at the moment, I couldn't explain this to the man or woman in the street. You know, why are we doing it? Why it's all got the same names, and how it fits in the public sector. So, and the principles, because the holding company could have 2 or 3 or 4 angles, couldn't it, or whatever they're calling themselves. And is it docked into our assurance statements and that sort of thing? So yes, it is educational. I do think we need a session. Maybe we could link at the end, later in the year, a development session followed by a paper in the meeting, because there are clearly lots of questions in people's minds, and we do want to be confident within the audit committee that the processes and the governance are appropriate and proper, not to decide whether or not they're going to buy this house or that. So could we put that on the work plan, please? Maybe for the autumn meeting, to have a development session before a meeting and a paper which makes it clear as to educate us and the combined authority. Okay, are we happy to move on? Right, thank you. Thank you, Rochelle. She gone over there, but thank you. Okay, you can see why I moved it up the agenda, because I thought it might. The novelty of it would mean that we'd like to know a bit more about it. So we've now got back on track. We've got 20 minutes for hygiene factors, and the complaints procedure, treasury management, and so on. So complaints procedure next. Robert Parkin is leading, and we're to comment and note.
Thank you, Chair. Times of the
essence.
I shall imagine a clock ticking in my ear. So yes, this hopefully is a relatively straightforward item, presenting to you the revised complaints procedures for the combined authority. The document set out in Appendix 1 to the report. Committee is asked to recommend approval to the board and to add any comments in. Obviously, it would help to have any comments at all you may have on the complaints policy as it stands. I'm ready to quickly spin through the particular changes that have been made, if that would help. But it may be that members of the committee are happy to note in general or specific terms anything that they have in relation to the overall policy. The changes are relatively small. They're about proportionality and about adding in clarity around the stages, and also a policy on unreasonable / vexatious complainants.
Well, unless anybody is anxious, I think we could leave it there for comments and noting. And Matt Maguire's got a comment.
Just, I'll be very quick, Chairman, because we are, as you say, pressed for time. The only thing I'd make a comment on is in the actual table of contents, when it talks about transport and street matters, it lists both Peterborough City Council, obviously, and the County Council. Just thinking, just in recent weeks, possibly because of the lockdown, I get a lot of complaints as a local councillor about illegal dumping, you know, instead of people, black sacks stuck on the side of the road. That tends to, outside of Peterborough, that is, of course, a matter for our district councils. And I wonder if actually the links, when it talks about street matters, people might assume that it covers such things. And so obviously in our case, the case of the County Council, the districts are the responsibility for clearing up those. So maybe a link to the district councils, just a comment. Thank you.
Certainly take that on board. Yeah, that's that street cleansing, of course, a district matter. Yeah, so we will update that.
Any other comments? No, therefore we note the procedure and the point put forward about clarity with the role of the District Council. If I thought reading the annual report of the Audit and Governance Review was challenging, item 12 we're now going to, which is Treasury Management, Capital Strategy, Treasury Management Strategy, the Investment Strategy, and the Minimum Revenue Provision Statement. There's quite a lot. But John assures me that it's not a long subject for today. John, also, will you introduce?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this really is just for noting. I think the committee has received some draft versions of these reports before. It did go to the main board in March. Each of these documents, and they have been approved. So the intention is for us to report on this during the course of the year. We will bring the outturn report from last year to the next committee. So unless there's any other particular questions, happy to take any questions.
David Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just one that I did raise before the meeting. In a couple of places it refers to I was expecting capital finance requirement will be nil on the 31st of March 2020. Clearly we've passed. And in line with guidance expects to charge no MRP in 2020-21. Should that actually be financing requirement will be nil on 31st of March 2021? Or should it be was nil on 31st of March 2020?
Okay. Well, this report, I mean, these papers were, as I say, taken to the board in March. So it was, the expectation was that it was the capital finance requirement would be nil on the 31st of March 2020. Obviously, that is still, in theory, subject to audit. But as mentioned in the previous, in the review of the accounts, there is no current expectation to fund any of the capital expenditure from borrowing. And in terms of the minimum revenue provision, that statement says that where the authority finances capital expenditure by debt, it must put aside resources to pay that debt in later years. So we're expecting there to be no debt at the beginning of this financial year. So there's no requirement to have a minimum revenue provision in year.
Okay. Right. So we will note these strategies as they have been approved, and we look forward to receiving an outturn report later in the year. Okay, the next item is the revised guide for project management. As much of the lifeblood of what the authority does is about managing projects, it's important to see the approach that is taken by the combined authority. Is anybody going to introduce it, or Robert?
So I'm hoping that Paul Rains is in attendance on this one.
The intention was for the committee just to receive it for noting only.
Paul is on the meeting, and so is Roberta, if you wanted either of them to make any comments.
I mean, what is the feeling? I mean, is this just placing on record the work that's been done so far, or are there more insights that would be useful to the committee to have?
As stated, the intention was just to receive it as a comprehensive list of the projects that are underway.
Are we happy to note it on that basis?
Happy for that, Chairman. I've read it.
Nick, do you have a point?
Just a more general point, really. If the purpose of having it on the agenda is just so we take note of the report, given the fact our agenda is really crammed, did we ought to be a bit more choosy about items that we sort of have on the agenda, and sort of only have ones that we're actually required to comment on?
That's a good question. I took a lot of items off the agenda where we did need to comment, and we'll get those next time. And I put things which I was advised we ought to note at the back end of the agenda in case we didn't have time to cover them. But maybe there's a better way of doing this. Anybody got any? I mean, it's good to put these on the record. It's good to give us the opportunity to see what's going on and raise a point. But is there an easier way? David Brown.
A potential way, Chairman, would be for papers like that to be circulated as and when they're done, and then we could have if they're just for noting, if people did have something to raise, there could just be an agenda list of you have received these papers, and again, people have to notify you a week beforehand if they've got anything they want to raise on any of those papers. Otherwise, we just sign them off.
And that way they remain in the public domain, because that's one of the things. Do people support the approach that David's just mentioned? Is that a yes?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. So I'd asked the officers to get us into a routine where items are to note but need to be on the record. And I would suggest rather than when they're ready, but prior to each meeting, or issue them as a batch, and then they might get some attention and allow us to comment it on exception basis at future meetings. Okay, that's a nod, right? That rushes us to the work plan. Has anybody got any comments on the work plan? Feedback? Right, David.
Sorry, all, you're going to start hating me. It says it's the 2019-20 work plan.
Yeah. I was hoping you wouldn't notice the things need to be better, and I think that's been hoisted. The thing that I found on it was that there's a meeting on the 2nd of April 2021, because the meetings are at the end, and the 2nd of April 2021, according to my calendar, is Good Friday. So I don't know where these dates came from, because it's the first time I'd seen them. Robert, did you find out anything?
Yeah, that would be moved to Tuesday, the 6th of April.
I think it's the comments from Councillor Brown remind us that we need to have confidence in these matters, and it's a bit splodgy. Yes, David.
Surely the 6th of April is into the following municipal year.
Municipal year runs to May.
All right. Tony Mason.
Do the elections have an impact upon that last date, or not? If we're going to be discussing or approving anything, getting input that could be of a political nature.
Help, Kim.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, probably one for Robert to answer, if I could hand over.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that this is the pre-election period and what's often described as PERDA. Well, any businesses of authorities carry on. The fact of an impending election, I think, simply highlights what is a perennial rule in local government, which is to do with the utilisation of resources and meetings solely for political purposes and political comments. So it shouldn't clearly, as we get nearer that stage, we'll be aware of pinch points and risk. But I would expect the business of a committee such as this one to be proceeding as normal. And obviously, if there are particular areas of sensitivity, then I'll work with the chair and the committee to think about how to manage those. But otherwise, I'd expect business to carry on.
And am I correct? Because I can't find any dates in the CMIS calendar. Do I assume that these dates are going to be agreed by the Combined Authority Board?
Sorry, Chair. The meetings card has now been approved. There was a bit of work that went in on that, and I'll be ensuring that those dates are populated into the CMIS system as a matter of priority.
Although they do have to be approved by the CA board on the 3rd of June.
Yeah.
Okay. So I assumed it was. So the dates that we had there, including the erroneous Good Friday, were on the municipal plan, which is yet to be approved by the CA board. Is that right?
Correct.
Robert,
Correct,
yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right. And I just think we just need to bear in mind, and when we prepare for our next meetings, the points so helpfully and determinedly made by David Brown about we need to get the bureaucracy rigor back into our paperwork. And I held my hand up to that as much as anybody else. So I thank you, David, for your eagle eye on that. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. We will either meet in extraordinary session at a time to be decided, or on the 31st of July. Thank you very much to everybody for your contributions. And there's some pluses, I think, in being able to go and make your own coffee at 10-minute breaks when you're online. But thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.